Ready when you are.
I've got, I have a meeting at 11.
Committee meeting for March 27, 2019. The purpose of the committee meetings are for the city departments to pass along information to the city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of the city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance mandates the city administrator as chair of the committee meetings. By ordinance, the committee makes no formal decision on committee matters. Rather, items are voted to move to a mayor and council meeting for consideration and vote, or staff receives guidance from the committee regarding a matter. This is a public meeting but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during the committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings held at 7 p.m. in the city council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month. The first item on today's agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for February 27, 2019. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Tizer, second by Councilmember Grower. Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Next item under Community Development, number 2, update regarding the Historic District Master Plan from TSW Design. Ms. Wakefield, Ms. Dybel.
Good morning. We wanted to give you an update of where we were with the Historic District Master Plan. So we met with the committee last evening after they've had the draft, which they reviewed and had comments on. We had a very good meeting last night. We look like we're going to have probably one more meeting with them after the comments that were received by the consultant and from the committee members. The consultant's going to be going back and updating, making some changes, working on the regulating map that he's put together to help them view everything and look at everything again. So it looks like they'll probably want one more meeting. Once we do that, we're going to have a special called meeting with the Historic Preservation Commission for the master plan itself, and then we'll be bringing it to council. So where we didn't have it to you in March, like we'd planned, we are moving forward.
We lost.
We lost. But we are going to be bringing it to you either May or June, most likely. So once we get the comments and other things updated from TSW after last night, we have another meeting. I have a feeling we'll probably have a special called meeting sometime, I think, in May with the Historic Preservation Commission, and then get it on a council agenda, most likely in June. That's where we look. That's where we stand at the moment. So it went very well last night. They seem to be in consensus, pretty much, with most of the items. So we were pleased at the end of the meeting. So it's moving forward. It's just not to you yet.
We have consensus on the master plan. It would also, when we bring it to mayor and council, we have to include the planning commission also. It will include those legislative changes to the UDC to implement the master plan and also to adopt the regulating map. But it's definitely a positive process. They're just being very, very thorough.
Very thorough.
Very thorough.
Very thorough.
Thank you. Floor is open.
So I just want to commend staff for working so hard on this. This is a big initiative, and really it's been, from what I've heard, it's great to hear there's been so many residents involved in this process, both with the committee of all being so active and involved, as well as the walking tours, feedback. So I just want to say that that's absolutely great, and also I just want to stress too, I think it is important that what's going to be presented to council and what's going to be discussed, making sure it's taking into account all those different voices. And so I think it's fantastic to hear there's a lot of consensus, looking forward to hearing that, and then also looking forward to really making sure to hear all the different voices on the where there wasn't consensus. This council can have a fruitful discussion with all different perspectives.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you. I echo exactly what he said, and for shepherding this along and making sure that all the citizens have been engaged and the committee members. So I think we'll have a good product at the end. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, discussion of a text amendment to Unified Development Code Section 4.3, Building Type Standards, and Section 4.5, Allowed Uses Regarding Mixed Use. Ms. Dybel.
Okay, so this text amendment for mixed use has been initiated by council and is going to planning commission in April. However, when we were at the council meeting, when it was initiated, we indicated, because there was still a lot of discussion, we would bring it back to committee another time before it went to planning commission to discuss it again, get some more feedback. So I want to give you a summary of what we've done. We had work sessions that began last August. We had 3 work sessions, one in August and 2 in October. We then had several committee meetings, one in November and one in January, that discussed all the different things that we were talking about for mixed use. We have, as staff, we looked at the surrounding jurisdictions, mixed use ordinances. We brought those to you at the work sessions, then again at committee meetings. We discussed at some of the committee meetings percentage options of what you liked, what you didn't like. Should you have 20%? Should you have 25%? Should you have 50%? And then we also asked the city of Alpharetta regarding their mixed-use ordinance, how they created their percentage number. They had created a master plan years ago, and then they followed that plan, and that's where they got the percentage number from. At committee in November, we brought forward several different classifications to discuss percentages for each of those. At the January committee meeting, after listening to all the minutes and the discussions in November, and we saw how the percentages were not going to, just didn't seem like they were going to work for what we were looking for at this time. So we brought forward a draft that had no percentages, but requiring 2 building types and removing the townhouse building type from the commercial heavy zoning classification. That draft went to the mayor and council meeting on February 25th and has been initiated. That's the draft that will go to planning commission on April the 16th. I think I have it in here. No, I didn't put that in
Yeah, you
there.
had it.
But
Last
that draft will go to planning commission on April 16th, which indicates a mixture of at least 2 building types. A mixed-use building type, if that's the only one they have, that would be fine also, because it would allow for commercial and residential, or they have to have at least 1 commercial building type and 1 residential building type. And then removing townhomes from the CH zoning classification. And the CH zoning classification is mainly up Alpharetta Highway from around Mansell Road north. So that's where we are at the moment. That's a quick summary of what we've discussed since last August regarding mixed use. I didn't know where you wanted to go. I know at the meeting in February, you still had a lot of concern about the mixed use. What we are trying to do here is put something in place, because for the comprehensive plan, which we're starting in the fall, we have asked for some additional money compared to what we've done in the past in order to have a market study done, so we can take a look and figure out exactly where we want to put mixed use, maybe a percentage done at that point in time if we get the market study in there.
And that's important, because the reason that, based on the research and the experience that we have in putting in percentages, is if you run into a situation where you have to justify that percentage. And I think legal can tell you, if we're challenged and go to court, and all we can say is, well, we just kind of sat around and thought that 20% was the right number, that does not, usually is not going to be in favor of the city. That's where Alpharetta has been successful in other cities, because they did the marketing study.
Floor is open.
Just a quick question. I mean, as far as Alpharetta doing the master plan, I think Milton's done the same thing, and some other cities do. I mean, I guess where they've looked at every single parcel and put
They looked at their
zoning
nodes.
categories at
Yes.
different nodes. So I guess if we're doing a market study, then how far away would we be from doing something like that so that we could get the right percentages in the right areas of the city?
Probably a year.
Yeah.
And that's an additional, like, a cost, planning cost, and
That's additional cost. We thought that it would be appropriate, more or less looking at what staff is proposing, kind of as a placeholder
Right.
to deal with it until we can get this in place. We thought it would be most appropriate to do it with the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan follows the strategic plan, which kind of high level of where the city wants to go. The comprehensive plan dives down into the land use and development, and then by knowing that the residential areas you're not going to touch, but you want the corridors to redevelop, by incorporating the master planning component with the comp plan, it will give you more a realistic view of what's going to be viable in the city.
right. All right, thanks.
And
Floor is
so
open.
I don't want to get into all my points that I obviously laid out for this council at the last council meeting, but just something that I want to stress is I'm definitely watching closely to what plans come in, because currently this council decided to keep 0% to be the number that a mixed use property can have 100% residential, 0% commercial, and that be completely acceptable, not needing any input from the city council or the residents. So I want to highlight that. So my hope is we absolutely can come to agreement sooner than later on this. What I'd also stress is, and I just want to make sure it's clear for everyone, the Alpharetta rule of the 25%, that is not a conditional use, that is a requirement, saying no matter
Yes.
what, it has to be 25%. That is not what I'm suggesting. I would love it. I would support it. I'd love something stricter. But at the same time, I think it's a very reasonable compromise. Where what I'm suggesting is anything that is 75, any mixed use property that's 75% residential or less gets to build without coming to council or the community, just as they can today. But if they want to build greater than 75% residential in this mixed use, it absolutely might be appropriate, but it involves needing council approval and community input. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everyone for what I was suggesting.
So I think the direction y'all are proposing is good. I like the concept of understanding the market, the specific view of the areas so it's not in question. And I think having it be legally defensible is certainly also very important. What Councilmember Palermo just presented is certainly also something worth thinking about. Where if it's below some number, it becomes conditional. Another concept, and I think I saw it flash by really quick, that might be interesting to pass on to the Planning Commission is can we do it with incentive? So if it's X percentage, these are the things that you can earn. If it's more than 25%, you get even more incentives to do it. And that, to me, drives it to the design phase for whoever's building it, right? And if you can catch it in that early phase, right, can they design the kinds of things that we'd really like to see? So looking at incentives, we did that with the properties around Holcomb Bridge Road, or around Holcomb Bridge and 400, with the number of stories, if you recall, earlier in the year. And I think that might be a way to get through some of the issues that we're seeing as we try and figure out, how to get what we'd all really like to see. So those are two, I think, things that maybe you could pass along to the Planning Commission.
Staff looked at incentives. We took a look and we looked at the city of Atlanta and we had looked at Buckhead Village in the Midtown. So we found that they all had relations to FAR bonus. So they had additional open space. They had on-street parking that created it, and they had stormwater area bonuses. So in Midtown, they also had FAR bonuses that related to the retail, affordable housing, basically underground parking, but there were specific criteria that they had to meet in order to get the bonuses. So if we did something like that, we'd have to set up the criteria, they'd have to meet the criteria, and then they'd have to get the bonuses if we wanted to go something and
Sure.
indicate that
I
route.
will tell you that in Atlanta, the SBIs are ordinance, there's different SBIs throughout the city. And they're set up in such a way that once the ordinance was approved by staff, not by staff, by the elected officials, the implementation is totally staff. It is, I mean, it is staff that works with the developer to look at these different bonuses. So that's one of the things that is probably a little bit, well, not, it is different than here as opposed to the city of Atlanta. That once that ordinance is approved, the SBI ordinance, it's totally staffed.
Sure, I think, just two ideas I think that have come from the discussion. One is, if it's under a certain percentage, it comes to council as conditional. The other idea is there a way to do some bonus kind of, initiative or incentive kind of thing? I think either of those would be interesting to learn more about.
And I hate to say this, but I will.
Could be bad.
Every one of their SBIs, having worked at the city, every one of their SBIs came out of a master planning or LCI effort. Every one of them.
Any further questions or comments?
Do you think we have everything we need to make sure planning commission will have a good discussion around this? I want to make sure if it's going to them.
Discussion.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're sending them something
Yes.
that has enough info and that they can kind of pass something on. That
Send them all.
The backup and everything
Backup,
else, and the letter and different things that we've
just want to
gotten.
make sure that, yeah,
Yes.
not sending them something prematurely, but it sounds like you guys are comfortable.
And so, and I think a lot of great points made by all my colleagues here. So I think a lot of good discussion. What I want to stress as well is really my philosophy. I'm always supportive of looking at how can we improve ordinances, how can we improve the code, and it's always a working discussion. But what I definitely don't want is I don't want perfect to be the enemy of the good, enemy of the better, because. Right now we just have it's open, where any of these mixed-use properties, they can come in and build 100% townhomes, 95% townhomes, etc. And you know what? There's some really good ideas, creative ideas that might come out of a long-term master plan, might come out of the next year discussion. But I'm certainly opposed to leaving the gate open for another year. If we look back to the last year, there's probably been 7 or 8 mixed-use properties that have had, 90%, 95%, 100% residential. And again, as I discussed at that council meeting, if this council was supportive of doing a moratorium on 100% townhomes on these mixed-use properties, I'd say we can take as long as we need. But knowing that the majority of this council is not supportive of that, I want to make sure we improve it. 25% being conditional use, I stand by, is much better than the 0% we have today. And I love the idea of always adding upon it. Just because I love the 25% doesn't mean 6 months later we don't find an even better way to fine-tune it and enhance it. Just want to share my philosophy on that.
Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Mike. I appreciate, where you're coming from. But a question that I would have for you all is, if someone is building a strictly residential, wouldn't they just ask for a different zoning category?
But they could.
Not if it's allowed by right already in the zoning, so they wouldn't have to go
So
through
they
the
wouldn't
process.
have to.
So actually,
Right.
let me
So
explain
that
how-
again goes back to where having a master plan could really help us in situations
Well,
like that.
Councilmember Wesley, I think that's an incredible point, and the exact reason why I want this update made is because today the way it works is you have a mixed-use property which says it should be a destination, says it should be all of this, but because we don't have this minimum requirement, what ends up happening is the developers just go, it's approved as right to build as 100% townhomes, 95% townhomes, whatever they want, and they're doing it. Whereas instead, if we create this rule, you're right, there's still a way they can get the 100% residential by doing a rezoning, but then it involves council weighing in, planning commission, the community, and that's all I want. What I want is, I'm not saying that there aren't some mixed-use properties that might be fully appropriate for 100% residential. There might be, but it deserves community input and deserves council approval.
I 100% agree with that, but I just want to be cautious that there might be some, unintended consequences of setting some limits that we don't necessarily understand on. So,
Well, I'd actually argue we're taking away the unintended consequences by not having a limit, which was having mixed-use zonings become 100% townhomes.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Item number 4, consideration of a text amendment of UDC Section 12.1, tree protection. Ms. Nybel. I'm sorry? Romberg.
Musical chairs here. Good morning. What I'm bringing to you today is a text amendment to make some additional modifications to tree protection ordinance. It actually is language, most of which is already in there, but it's just reinforcing it and bringing it a little bit further in, up in the actual text. Article 12.1 applies to any activity that requires a development permit. Is the wording that is in there. And so what we want to do is that we want to bring that forward to basically be, as soon as we get the first application in for any project, then the ordinance applies. There's some confusion the way the language is, and I'm going to pull the ordinance up in just a second and go through the track changes on where it's placed and thinking that it doesn't come in until they actually apply to take the tree down, as opposed to during the planning stages. One of the things that is required in the ordinance is the submission of written justification of the removal of any specimen tree during that conceptual design stage. And that is what is being brought later. And by then, the site plan's already set, and the argument is my site plan's already set and approved by whatever jurisdiction, has given that approval to them. So this text amendment is to clarify that any application that comes in that requires review under Article 13, which is going to cover anything that's a rezoning, DRB, Historic Planning Commission, preliminary plat, final plat, doesn't matter, the very first time they come in, then that's when they're required to provide this information to us. The other thing that we want to do is add some additional definition for calculating the fee and how we determine the fees that may be charged to someone who takes specimen trees down without a permit. It is a little bit difficult, and I'll go to the text now to kind of show you why that is an issue. Bear with me just a second. Okay. So the Article 12, we've got our purpose, intent, applicability. All we're wanting to do is that at the very beginning here under applicability is that we want this to be associated with any activity that requires review under Article 13. That way it's tied to that very first application that comes in, which is how we're acting, but we want it to be very clear to those who read the UDC that this is when we're requiring the justification for removing a specimen tree. All the rest of this that comes through here is the same thing. Basically, the following activities are exempt. However, they have to do a tree removal permit, which is something we have had some confusion about, that people believe that if they're single family, they're exempt from all tree removal permits, which is actually not the case. Single family, anything non-specimen is exempt from needing a tree application permit, but we still need an application to know that what they're doing is non-specimen. So they pay a $25 application fee. And this is just to clarify that. It's the way we've always processed things. But a lot of people will go and look at something on the website or read the UDC and then say, oh, but it says I'm exempt. And I assume I don't have to do anything else because I'm not taking a specimen tree down. But we have to have proof that it's not a specimen tree because not everybody knows what a specimen tree is. This is, again, just to note that the tree survey is required at the time that they come in for review under Article 13. And then I'm going to go down to, this is just a repeat of that, the tree protection plan has to come in when anything under Article 13 review comes in. This is to just reiterate that the justification and all the description that is described in Section 12.1.3 for tree removal has to be provided as a part of this plan. It's just referencing that same language. And this is that language. So when we go to removal of specimen tree, this is the documentation that's supposed to be provided to us. And so the very first language says that you would need a tree removal permit. And so the thought was, we don't have to do this until we actually apply to take it down, which is at LDP. And at land disturbance, you already have an approved site plan, for example, in a rezoning plan that's come through. If we don't have that discussion early on, we have a lot more trees that they are taking down without going through a lot of fighting with us to make sure that we keep as many as we can. So this is really just to help staff be able to argue for keeping more specimen trees earlier in the process the way that it was intended to be. And then the last thing is for fee in lieu of specimen tree preservation. So our paragraph B is if a tree that is classified as specimen is taken down without a permit. The language currently says that they are required to pay $1,000 per tree density unit of the specimen trees removed. The problem is that we generate the density units based on the diameter at breast height. And most of the times when we catch this, the trees aren't even taken down, which makes it impossible to determine what the diameter is at breast height. So, for purposes of calculating that, we've had some conversations with the legal department about this language. If they've got a tree survey that shows us the type, the species, and the size of the trees, we can use that to generate whether or not there was a specimen size that was removed. If they are unable to provide that to us, then we are making an assumption that there's two parts to it. One is if their tree stump's still there. I have a very great example located on Hembry Road. We got a call that some trees were coming down. We went out there, and they luckily had cut most of the stumps at that point off a few feet above the ground. They weren't very close to the ground. That's not going to be a terrible difference in measurement. It might be a half an inch larger just because trees are not perfectly straight. They tend to have some undulations, and they do get larger as you get closer to the ground. But at least it would be very close. And so we had an opportunity to get some measurements. Unfortunately, it took more trees down because it didn't stop. But we were able to get some measurements at that time that we feel comfortable being able to use in order to generate the penalties for the tree removal company who was working without a permit. If there are no stumps, which we have a lot of times, they've actually pulled everything out, nothing is left behind, there's not even any logs left out there, then we wanted to assume an average of 20 inches in DBH would be presumed for all the trees that are removed. And we are able to look at aerials and go, you know, okay, these are the larger trees, these are the shorter ones. We have a lot of available information to us in most cases to be able to say it's not 100 trees. We can determine usually about how many trees have been removed based on the information that we've got available to staff. We chose the 20 inches because it's about in the middle of the maximum, well, there's two reasons. One, it's the minimum oak specimen size. And so once it reaches 20 inches, that's the bottom, and a lot of times that's most of our trees are coming down. That's going to be the case. And then also when you look at the tree density units that we have going from the top to the bottom, this is about in the middle, maybe slightly below the middle. And it just seemed to be a great place to just kind of start to find a way to have a way to penalize this. If the applicant is unable to submit to us information regarding the condition of those trees, because that is the second piece, it's not just the size, it's the condition of the tree, then we are going to assume that they are specimen trees. In the case that I referred to on Hembry Road, there were some of these trees that we could clearly tell were hollow in the middle. We have determined those would likely have not been specimen. We don't know because from the outside they may have looked fine. But because we could see this after the fact, we didn't count those. But there's still about $58,000 worth of specimen trees that they owe us money for that we will hopefully get taken care of when I find a way to get in touch with the company. So that is pretty much it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Let me kind of just do a backstory on this. I was concerned, I thought that something had changed in our tree ordinance over the years, and I went to staff and I said something's changed because we're taking down a lot of trees. The tree ordinance doesn't seem to be engaged here, and I thought the ordinance had been changed, and then I thought perhaps the UDC, during the adoption of the UDC, it had watered down the tree ordinance. Lenore assured me that the tree ordinance was adopted in its original form. However, she did point out that it engages entirely too late to be beneficial. So that is where this was coming from. My intention was just to have the tree ordinance do what it was originally intended to do, and this will help us get there.
And just as an add-on to that, from a procedural perspective, staff has been working this way more recently. I do believe a few years ago, it was not the case. The staff did not necessarily feel they had the right to question the removal of specimen trees as long as they documented it, replanted for it, and or paid for it in accordance with the code. To make the argument to say, tell me why you can't rearrange everything on your site to save this one tree, wasn't something that staff necessarily felt empowered to do, and this would solve that problem. And it is the way I have been having staff function based on my interpretation. This is just to In my opinion, this is just making it very clear to anybody who reads it, no matter which section of the article they start in, that this is what our intent is for this.
Floor's open.
Just, my question should be simple, Councilman Palermo. So when I first read this, it was a little bit confusing, but I think all that is really going on here, and I just wanted you to confirm that to me, is that you're moving the process forward, which you've said a couple of times, and then the addition of 3B.
Correct.
Is there anything else in here that's new?
No, the only other thing that has been changed is that the text, this very last thing I have on here, there was an error, and there was some of the text regarding non-specimen tree removal that was actually in the wrong section. It had been put below paragraph A in the next section. It should have been moved forward, but that's it. The only change in the actual practice that's happening here is the calculation for the fee for specimen removal. The rest of this is as it was intended to be in the first place. Because of that one sentence that says that to take it down the tree, you need a permit, there was a lot of misunderstanding about that, meaning that we don't ask for this until you come for a permit. And
Thank you, that makes a lot more sense.
That is it.
I've marked up a whole page trying to find all the spots, so thank you.
It was challenging trying to figure out the best way to refer to something that already existed so that it would, we wouldn't miss something.
Thank you.
So I think good presentation. I appreciate the mayor's clarification as well. I think all a good thing to move it forward earlier in the process. My one concern is regarding 3B and kind of the way you described it on why the 20 inches is that's the smallest oak that is a specimen tree. And my concern is, so first I just want some clarification. 3B, if I fully follow the rules, so let's say I'm a developer, I have a large property that I want to develop. If I fully follow the rules, just as this says, you're involved earlier in the process, does 3B affect me?
No.
Exactly. And so 3B only affects me if I don't fully follow the rules.
Correct.
And my concern is, if we think of, was it Windfair? Was that the one where they next to Windfair, there was the property that was ag, and they requested to go to RS9. We ended up rezoning them to RS30 because we felt that was more appropriate. Was that?
It's on Eve Circle.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Eve Circle, okay.
Correct. It's
So-
across the street from
So
Windfair, yes.
I walked the perimeter of that property, and that had some of the largest specimen trees I've seen. Some of them seemed even larger than the one by Luca's Pizza, which is a very large one, definitely larger than the 20 inches. And seeing how large some of those were, this would have been relevant if they chose not to follow the rules. It was a large area, a lot of these specimen trees you could really just see by looking through and everything. I'm just concerned that I love what this is doing. This is making it easier for you to really have consequences. But at the same time, I think I truly believe the majority of residents do not want to see, all the properties clear cut. And by having a inappropriate tree policy, I think reduces that possibility. But what I'd prefer to see is, I'd prefer to see the 20 inches being a little larger, so it's not the minimum oak, because otherwise I'm concerned that for properties like that one or many others, there could be incentive to not follow the rules, knowing that in fact the penalty might not have been as large.
Right. Well, so just to clarify, what this is for is the majority of the people who would be impacted by this B paragraph are residential property owners who believe that they are exempt and they go clear cut their property. For example, this woman on Hembry Road, she has 2-acre parcel. She had some trees fall down. It scared her, so she hired Nacho Tree Expert LLC to come out. I'm not kidding. That is the name of the company. To come out and take down everything on her property. Everything. Everything but the house is now gone. I was just out the other day, and it was a little further than I was expecting it to be. They're just based on the ones that we were able to kind of identify as being what we think truly were specimen. There's 58.2 density units of trees that have been removed. There's a total of about, we'll say, 12 trees. I think I don't have the list with me. This is what this is primarily going to go after. Developers who come in for a land disturbance permit. So if, let's say, that particular developer were to move forward with that. Now, if they went out ahead of time and said, we're going to do whatever we want to, and they start taking things down, yes, this would apply. And yes, they would have to be able to provide this documentation to us. If they were coming through the process and were zoned RS30 and they came in with a preliminary plat, at preliminary plat, they're gonna have to provide me a tree survey, show what specimen was non-specimen based on an arborist report that gives us the condition part of it to make those match. And then they've got to prove to me why that tree has to come out. So for example, if the property is limited just so that once you put your setbacks in the different directions and you put your infrastructure in that we require by code, there's no other alternatives. We can't find a way to provide all the services that we need to the property and build a house. Let's just say they're building one, then that is how they're gonna give us that justification and prove to us that there's no other way that they can work around saving that tree. And once they've done that and that's been approved, then they have two options if they are taking specimen trees down. One would be to replant new trees to replace the specimen that are being taken out. And then the second would be to pay $500 per tree density unit into the tree bank fund in recompense for that removal. So paragraph A, plus all of the stuff that we've been talking about that precedes this would cover that. This is purely for someone who hires a tree company who doesn't bother to come and get a permit, and we need to find a way to have more enforcement opportunity against that because it is very, very challenging to get people after the fact.
And so that's very helpful. I think with that example, I do support it as is. I guess kind of my concern is the example where it's not that homeowner that brought in Nacho Tree Company, but more of the example of the Eve Circle. If they were to have ripped all the trees down prior to an LDP. Can you remind me, when we updated the tree policy in the last couple of years, did the actual policy that came to council have this clause, or was this just a work session discussion? I remember there was a discussion on there being, a very low cost or perhaps even no cost, whatever it was, but they couldn't, but that was only assuming they didn't have a rezoning in the next, I forget. So that was something that was just work session hypothetical that never came. Okay.
Remember that. So yeah, it's not in there. Yeah, the only changes that we have made in the past 3 years since I've been here is we did increase the size, or decrease the size rather. It was 24 inches for the oak and it did go down to 20. Is the big change that we have made. But we looked at, all the other ordinances around us and the different sizes and what made sense and making sure we had a good balance that we can have a healthy tree population in the city, try and preserve it as much as possible with having, a bit of a stick to be able to try and encourage people to keep them.
Yeah, in situations like that you described with a developer where there is a tree that you'd like to keep, we'd all like to keep, but you can't because of setbacks or sidewalks or something like that. Are there incentives or any variances or appeal process that we have that can help protect those trees and maybe allow a little flexibility in
So the way, not necessarily, but the way that the ordinance is written is that the planning and zoning director and or the engineering director, and I can't remember which one has which authority, it kind of goes back and forth in here, have to approve that. So if I'm taking a look, for example, there was a townhome mixed-use development that came in, there were a number of units that were far enough away from infrastructure that it was open space. And in my opinion, based on looking at the grading plan, there was no reason for this one particular tree to even be touched. There was a building that would have been here with townhomes in it, plenty of space, so why not find a way to be able to save this? Why are you showing that it's going to be removed? And that's because they were going, and I said no. And they've since withdrawn, but my argument was, show me why that can't be open space and common and saved. Show me why this area where there's a cluster of them. And so I'm going to look at it more, obviously by context, but especially if we see an area where there's obviously a larger population that are grouped together. Now, there's also looking at, that's where the arborist comes in, is the health of those. Even if they're perfectly fine now and they're just reaching that specimen age, when they're really close together, they may not last a lot longer because they're competing with each other. But if I see an area where there's clearly some larger trees that are certainly worth saving, well, why isn't that a central common space amongst this where they actually preserve that area, it becomes part of their open space, and they shift their buildings around to save it? And that's going to be part of the conversations that we have at the very early stages when they're coming in for the pre-application meetings, and we're letting them know, as soon as they lay a site plan in front of us, we need a tree survey because I'm looking at your aerial, seeing all these things that we think are potentially healthy trees. Either prove that they're not, or show us why it's impossible to balance best use, obviously, because they have an investment they have in this piece of property, but with the preservation of the trees at the same time.
Okay. No, that's great to hear that there is some context flexibility, because it's hard to imagine every possible scenario.
And just to add to that, once it comes through staff, those tree plans and everything that I just referred to are part of whether it's DRB, rezoning, the preliminary, whatever that is. So whoever's going to be reviewing that outside of staff, so it won't be just us, there's going to be another board or commission or the council that's going to be looking at that too. We'll have it available.
So based on Councilmember Willsey's great questions, which I agree with, as well as me probably having some follow-up questions for you regarding just wanting to make sure I fully understand and think more about the 20 inches. Keeping that in mind, I still actually want to just motion to move this forward to council. So do expect some follow-up questions on what Councilmember Willsey said, as well as my stuff, but I prefer to just move this to council.
And I can certainly put together some numbers as well to show you what the costs may be per tree based on some of these numbers that may help with making a decision on what you want that number to be.
So one question I do have is.
There's a motion on the floor. I just want to make sure we've got that covered. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, go ahead.
The fines associated with this, in the case of Nacho Tree, not sure whose tree it is, but anyway, does the firm pay that fine because they didn't get a permit, or does that fall on the homeowner? How does that work?
So the way that it is addressed in Article 13 is that whoever actually physically does the violation of the UDC in this particular case is the one responsible. And then the city may also notify the property owner.
Right.
Normally what that's referring to is code compliance as opposed to the tree removal. So what we're doing in this particular case is that the tree company has an opportunity to provide us a list to show us, if they want to show us that what they took down was not specimen, here's all the reasons why, then that fee would go away because we would be able to say, okay, it's non-specimen, here's your permit fees that you're going to pay, and we move on.
Okay.
They can't provide it, we're going to be citing them for failure to comply with the tree ordinance, failure to have the permit, failure to comply with what's currently written as paragraph B up here, and then we would assess that fine against them. Well, we'd make the recommendation, they'll come to court, we make the recommendation of what the fine would be based on that.
Okay.
We are also working with the property owner because we also have land disturbance.
Yeah.
And so we're working to get her property in compliance because of that code violation, and then working through the tree company because of them taking down the trees without getting a permit, because they represented themselves to her that they had everything they needed to be able to take the trees down.
And I think I don't know if there's something from a PR perspective we can do, but just talking to my neighbors, I don't think anyone knows that what they should check for when a tree company comes.
And that is something that we're gonna work on, because there's a couple of topics that we've got, and this is one of them where, and there's a lot of old information out there. If you search for tree removal on the city's website, the first thing that comes up is a brochure that's like 20 years old.
Yeah.
That says single family residential properties at all are exempt for tree removal, and then it talks about string buffers. And so there's a lot of very confusing information out there, and it's clearly dated, it's hidden, buried somewhere, and we're working on cleaning and finding those things that are links that are still living out there and getting rid of them, and then doing some PR to kind of get some what to know information out.
Got it. Thank you.
So there's a motion on the floor to move forward with a second. Any further discussion or questions?
I'd just like to thank everyone for supporting this.
All in favor, say aye. Raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you.
So, Mr. Palmer,
Sure.
I'm not sure I'll have support, but given the fact that I see a number of residents in the audience that are here for a very heavy transportation agenda, and this next item I think is such a big one, I think it could be valuable to have a full council. I'd like to make a motion to defer this to the next ComDev committee meeting, but again, I don't know if I'll have support, but I'd like to suggest that.
Which item, number 5?
Number 5.
Second.
So a motion moved to the next committee meeting.
To the next community development committee meeting.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor, raise your hands. Okay, motion carries.
Yeah.
Under transportation, item number 6, discussion of resident request to pave Kent Road.
Well, good morning, everyone. So the first item on the agenda is the residents' request to pave Kent Road. So some facts about the Kent Road. This is one of the 8 dirt roads in the city, and we've gotten several requests over the years. The total length is 3,600 feet. It connects King Road to Petrus Road. And the traffic volume as existing is 330 vehicles per day. And the road was annexed from Fulton County as is. That's why it's a dirt road. So the item was discussed at the February committee last month. The guidance was to reach out to the homeowners on Kent Road, so we did. We offered them the flexibility of just mailing us back, email, text, everything was open. So that's why I think we got good response. So 6 out of 7 homeowners living on Kent Road who we asked for the survey, they participated. 1 parcel is vacant. So the 6 responses, we got 4 yeses. 1 said yes, but with the condition of drainage and through traffic addressed. And 1 said no, but they would vote yes if speed bumps were included. So that's traffic calming. So just to clarify that, it is a public street today, and it will be a public street later if you decide to pave it. And if the residents are interested in traffic calming, the city has a traffic calming policy that they need to follow. And talking about the cut-through traffic, it is a public street. I'm not sure if you could restrict access in any way for the general public to a public street. So just some background, the issue is really the complaints we get about dust, potholes, speeding, and gravel in the road, and not all residents wanted it paved, so we heard from a couple of them. And there is no policy or rule in the city to pave the dirt road, so it'll be a special request. And looking at some analysis of pros and cons, so pros, the existing gravel road, there is some maintenance, it takes some money, not a huge amount, but some effort, more frequent than a regular paved road. And then the bigger benefit, as staff sees, it breaks up a large block with improved east-west connectivity. So those are good benefits. And then the cons, so speeding, some residents think it's already a problem. It may be a bigger problem when it's paved. And again, the complaints of the cut-through traffic, and we're going to have to live with that. Again, like I said, it is a public road, and it will be a public road if it's paved. So to conclude, staff's recommendation is actually to pave because we see the connectivity benefit as a big benefit to the city's network. So we think it's worth spending some money on, and staff has submitted a request in the upcoming budget year for your consideration. And the estimated cost is $500,000. That's our request in the budget, and it gets the items I listed under. Okay, so any questions?
Did you say that this would be less expensive to maintain than the gravel road?
Yes, because once you spend the money up front, then yes, there's not as frequent maintenance on that.
So on an annual basis, do you know how much money we spend?
Well, when the pavement is in good
right
shape.
Now? No, right now.
Yeah.
It's about $1,000.
$1,000 a year?
Around $1,000 for the materials, not the labor and equipment. Just for the materials itself, it's around $1,000.
Well, and one of the things that I would like to reiterate here, and I realize that you all would prefer to pave it, but I think that the residents of this road need to understand that when you pave it, speeds will increase, cut-throughs will increase, because being a gravel road is an automatic traffic calming.
It is.
So, and please give us an idea of what what you can do with traffic calming. It's my understanding you can't put speed bumps on a road, correct?
The residents can request traffic calming, but again, it's a pretty extensive policy, extensive process that they'll have to go through. So that's the that's the traffic calming aspect of it.
I just want to make sure that the residents have all of the information.
Yeah, and
Because-
one more piece of information that I forgot to mention before, many of the complaints, the current complaints on dust, they are not necessarily coming from the residents who have access from Kent Road. There's other subdivisions that just back up to Kent Road with no access to Kent. Sometimes the dust complaints are from them. But the survey, we reached out to only the residents who have access along Kent.
Have you provided the residents with the traffic calming ordinance?
No, but we can.
Please.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? This is just discussion?
Yes, so, yeah, I think we got what we needed. So it is a request in the upcoming budget year. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 7, discussion of resident request to pave Lum Crow Road.
So, again, Lum Crow Road is one of the 8 dirt roads we have in the city, and the total length in Roswell is 3,000 feet. And the total length in Cherokee County is 1,000 feet. Staff has not prepared a cost estimate yet, and again, it is a dirt road because that's how we annexed it from Fulton County a long time ago. So as you can see from the map, it's just like a bypass. It connects Cox Road to Cox Road. So we don't really see a huge benefit to the city network provided by this road. So if it was paved, we don't see the network improvement benefit from this one. And again, the issues, we get complaints about dust, potholes, speeding, gravel in the road, and not every resident wanted it paved, as we hear. And there's, like I said, no existing policy on paving of dirt road in the city. So analysis, this one is going to be more difficult to pave than Kent Road because of topo and some drainage issues. This was also discussed at February committee, and the guidance was to reach out to Cherokee County if there's interest from them. So we had a conversation with them, so they are open to talk. If City of Roswell took the lead, they'll be supportive and they'll reimburse us later. So they are open, but as long as the city took the lead. So the issue here is that our part is longer, 3,000 feet, but comparatively much simpler to work on. Their piece, much smaller, but very difficult. I drove it a couple of weeks ago, just too many curves, too many turns. So if we were to pave it, we could just pave our piece. If we were to include their piece in the paving project, it's going to need some design work in addition to just the construction work. So if we ever came back to you with a recommendation to pave Lum Crow, our recommendation would be to just do the City of Roswell piece, not necessarily the county piece. And the county, after we pave it, maybe it will become a higher priority for the county. So again, on pros, the only one we could list is really the dust control. There will be no dust on a paved road. But in the cons, so speeding, it's going to be higher cost, and we don't see any benefit to the city roadway network. And based on those pros and cons, staff recommendation for now is not to pave.
Is the cost with this similar to yearly, similar to Kent Road?
Yes, it's about the same.
Okay.
Would these be proposed to be separate projects, or is this out of road resurfacing?
This is definitely going to be a side project, special money, different request, different than the road resurfacing.
I may as well tell the council now, we're looking at a pretty big shortfall in our budget. So even if these projects are desired, we probably wouldn't be able to fund these in the next fiscal year.
So actually, I can, even for the Kent Road, we requested the money, but in order to, submit a balanced budget, the Kent Road request was under the remove items. You would still see it, but it's going to be listed under.
Okay, we already pulled that out?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see any harm in putting it in the budget, knowing full well that we may not be able to fund it, just so we can have further discussions.
Are we talking about Lum Crow or Kent?
Lum Crow.
Lum Crow?
Yeah, as a
If
request.
that's the guidance, then yeah.
That's my opinion. it sounds like it may not be something we can fund anyway, but it would just give us more time and, you know, in the end, if we don't fund it, we don't fund it.
But staff's recommending that we not do this, so they're not going to want to include it in their budget if they don't recommend doing the project.
Typically, when we see that, when we get that packet, isn't it could be that transportation is going to come with some quote-unquote funded requests and then some unfunded requests where we get to see all, we could move a funded one away, we could add an unfunded. Is that how it is
Yes,
presented?
right, but they're,
Not if they don't put it on.
they're not wanting to do this project. Staff is saying, we don't recommend that we do this project, so they would not normally include it in their budget if they don't feel as though it's an appropriate project.
So two things here. One, that list of unfunded projects in the budget, as you're going to see it, is a very extensive list. I know only for transportation. And so our recommendation is obviously purely based on what we are seeing. So I'm just looking at the pros and cons. To spend that much money to must, you know. If I were to look at the priority and the needs, transportation needs in the city, it's going to be very hard to justify, but if it's a decision of the committee to put on the agenda, we could.
Because my preference would be as you present your budget, even if this is not one of the funded items, my preference would still have this be under the list of unfunded, just for the full awareness and discussion as we compare the different items you have.
I think what you're saying is it's not an undesirable project, it's just from a priority perspective, it's lower, right?
True.
Okay, any further comments or discussion? Is there a motion on this? Do we have a motion? I don't know.
No, so add it to the budget or not?
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I don't think we need action to add it to the budget. I mean, it just would be, we could show it as unfunded. I can tell you right now, we don't have the money to do it.
Okay.
But we can add it in there just as
I think
to generate some
keeping it
discussion.
visible is important.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll work with finance department and add a request.
Okay, so this was just discussion. All right, moving on to number 8, consideration to modify the scope of the Big Creek Parkway project. Mr. Ruff.
So the Big Creek Parkway, you know, our biggest T-Splost project, the initial cost of, as it is scoped today, is $58 million. So recent history, so as GDOT was working on their express lane project, the council paused the Big Creek Parkway project for 3 months, I guess 2.5 months, and then unpaused it. So during those 2-3 months, staff went through a value engineering effort. And we do that for all projects, you know, even if we are working on it, we still look at, you know, different options to cut costs and impacts. So we thought about the rescope to reduce right-of-way impacts and the overall construction cost and the overall cost of the project. So just to refresh our memory, this is the current scope. So this is the intersection of Holcomb Bridge and Warsaw Road. It adds turn lanes. This is like currently the phase 1 of the project. It's about 90% designed, and we started right away for this one. Phase 2 is around about in the middle of Warsaw Road, and then a brand new road that goes over some apartment buildings here, and then goes over wetlands, so huge bridge structures, and then part comes down to Old Holcomb Bridge, cross over 400 with no connection to 400, and then goes around Kimberly Clark, the intersection of Old Alabama and Holcomb Woods, and then goes along, basically improves the existing Holcomb Woods Parkway. So again, the need and purpose of the project was to provide a bypass to the big, very congested stretch of Holcomb Bridge because of the interchange. So here is the proposed scope change for the project. So the way it works is we're still keeping the intersection of Holcomb Bridge and Warsaw in the project, suggesting to keep it in the project because we need this bottleneck, this choke point improved for motorists to be able to get to either the beach or if they want to bypass. So it is important to fix this intersection. So this solid yellow line, we are still suggesting to keep it in the project. Then the new road, basically, rather than creating a new road here with a lot of impacts to wetland and property, we're suggesting to use the existing old Holcomb Bridge Road, improve it significantly, bring it up, loop around, and then go over 400, still goes down around Kimberly Clark, but then we are suggesting to end it at Old Alabama Road. The Holcomb Woods Parkway piece, we could call it a future phase to be done sometime in the future. Holcomb Woods is already 4 lanes divided. It doesn't have all the sidewalk that it needs, but still, we could use some other monies like our sidewalk money to improve that piece. So if we exclude this old Holcomb Wood piece and do the rest of it, and these other 2 dotted lines, so still would like to bring it to Warsaw, but this little piece has impacts to the property here, still the same apartment complex. So we're suggesting to make this maybe a future phase, and then maybe we go on the other side of Holcomb Bridge, south side of Holcomb Bridge, and try and connect using Market Boulevard. So all the dotted yellow lines are future phases, but for now the question would be if you like the new scope, the solid yellow, the intersection improvement, and the new or alignment of the blue phase 2.
So, go ahead.
So I have 3 questions. You can go first.
Okay, I think the one concern I have with this, and I know we've talked to GDOT about it, is the bike and ped connectivity that I think potentially would have existed through the wetlands and over to the apartment complex over there. We've talked to GDOT. It's not in the scope of this, right, to create that connectivity from the greenway over to the apartment complex. But when that bridge is being rebuilt on 400, the opportunity then presents itself. The bridge over Big Creek, that's the opportunity where we can potentially create some connectivity there from
Yes.
from a bike ped perspective. And I know GDOT has said that's something they could accommodate.
Yeah,
but
I think that's easy to accomplish for GDOT.
Yeah.
And even if GDOT is not interested, it's just a matter of doing some work underneath.
Yeah.
So yes, that could be done, and we made that point very, very clear to GDOT that that's very high priority. That was never a part of Big Creek Parkway project, and it's still not. But we are pretty sure it could get taken care of as part of GDOT's project or a separate project by the city.
Just when the
It's very
construction's
doable.
going. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
So I have 3 questions. So one is, if we look at Warsaw Road, so I fully understand the need to really fix that intersection. But what's the reason for the yellow solid line going past the dotted line? Because I know the original plan was that's where it was going to catch Big Creek Parkway. But is there still benefit and value in having that piece north of the orange dotted line? So if we right there.
Yeah, because that's a very congested, approach to the intersection. And the thing is, if we are with the new proposed scope, we are kind of taking away the opportunity for Warsaw traffic to get onto the Big Creek Parkway directly. But we still want them to use Big Creek Parkway. So this will help alleviate some of that existing congestion and help them, still make this left turn. And if they still want to get onto the Big Creek Parkway, they'll be able to. So this is kind of an important piece.
I guess for me, the bigger priority would be that dotted line future connection. I mean, if we're right there, yeah, I would see that as a bigger priority than, is it just widening Warsaw Road? Is that what it is, the north of right there? Or what is that improvement?
Yes, it adds an additional left turn lane. And Rob, what's this piece? What happens here?
It's improvements to Warsaw in conjunction with the intersection improvement at Holcomb Bridge. So basically the 2 left turn lanes, some median and channelization improvements at the driveways, and then tying that back to the
Okay, so not, there, at no point is there a permanent widening? It's not just that you're adding additional lanes permanently, you're just adding turn lanes?
If we end up moving forward with the graphic on the screen, it will not be a 4-lane Warsaw Road connecting to 2 lanes. It will
Okay.
be an intersection project and the connections to the existing network
Okay.
required by the intersection project.
All right, thank you. So, again, I do want to just stress that since we're building this east-west connection, I would love to see that potentially sooner than later, that dotted line. So that was one
Sure.
thing. 2 other things I have, just want to make sure they're more design specific, but this whole new road will completely have sidewalks per our policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other item is when Mr. Asenbrack was presenting the look and the design of the bridge, Mr. Grower had brought up the benefit in pushing for there to be a median on the bridge, which this council unanimously supported. I want to make sure that's still a design feature of the bridge.
That. So an unintended consequence of, if you can go back to the previous slide, of going from a T intersection to a loop is that we no longer have to accommodate the left turn west to south over the bridge, which allows us to do exactly what you've requested and take another look at that bridge and provide a median similar to what you see on Encore Parkway.
Excellent.
So I'm very supportive of this. I think it's an awesome and elegant solution to the east-west connectivity issues. I can see myself using it. And if I go back here to the meeting notes, it's $17 million less expensive than the original one. So I just want to congratulate y'all on coming up with a very interesting and elegant solution to this. Can't wait to see it.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that. It's thanks for your guidance you have provided in the past and the pause.
Yeah, the pause I know was challenging on everyone, right? Because it's
Yes.
such a big project, but I think in the end, what we're going to end up with is a great project.
It
So
turned out
thank
great.
you all.
I'd like, if there's any more discussion, you're looking for a movement forward to agenda vote?
Yes, actually, there is a few more things. So, yeah, I think you guys understand how the proposed alignment works now. So, yes, it is going to be a $17 million saving in the T-Splost funds. So I hope you could see the number. So this is the comparison of before and after. So the current alignment as being designed at 13,700 cars, and the proposed alignment, it's still pretty significant, although we are not going directly to Warsaw Road. The right-of-way cost savings, it's about 7 million from 15 down to 8. Construction cost is 10 million less, so 40 going down to 30. Total cost is 56 versus 39 million. So the schedule-wise, as being designed today, we were hoping ribbon cutting fall of 2023 with the proposed alignment, because now we are going to have to go back redesign. So we are seeing some delay here. Now it says spring of 2024. The road length, it's going to be a little bit longer actually, but then the bridge length is much less. So that's where some of the cost saving is coming up. So, but Rob has one more slide to explain to help with the scheduling piece here.
There's 2 asks from staff. One is to move forward with the alignment change, and the second is to change the procurement strategy and our delivery method. We would like to work with our consultant that's already on contract and modify the approach for this. If you go back to the line, for the blue line per the graphic, we'd like to deliver the blue line, Big Creek Parkway, as a design build project that will take advantage of the fact that we've already got existing funding in our accounts already, with more coming in 3 months when the budget is approved, and then more coming 12 months later when the next year's budget is approved. Going design build on the blue line will allow us to cut the ribbon at least 12 months quicker than we originally would do. The biggest reason why that is a fact is when you do design build, you do not reach the traditional 100% design, 100% right of way, and then 100% construction. You basically go to about a 40% design at the same time you're concurrently buying all of your right of way, and then the contractor ends up absorbing some of those design costs. So you're groundbreaking significantly sooner. Your construction time actually probably increases a little bit because some of that design time is absorbed into the contractor, but you are groundbreaking significantly quicker, and you are ultimately cutting the ribbon quicker. It was not a good strategy 2 years ago when we started the project because we didn't have the funding in the bank like we have now. I hope that makes sense. That's cool.
So I have a question not related to that, but related to Old Holcomb Bridge Road. Now, isn't that really needing to be replaced?
There was a previously identified T-SPLOST project to replace that bridge. We always thought, staff's thinking and elected officials thinking 3 years ago when we put together T-SPLOST was that we would need to reconstruct that bridge that's under weight restriction in order to, if I can see the clicker, in order to provide better access for heavy equipment to get back into this area to physically build some of the bridges that we were proposing originally. The large bridge that was here before is no longer there, so the need to replace that bridge isn't as high as it was. Ultimately, because the Blue Line is going to be a complete street, we would accommodate all users of the facility. We're going to be replacing that bridge included in the scope of the Blue Line. So,
Thank you.
So we need approval and guidance on two things. So the alignment modification, that's the first one.
Motion to approve the alignment modification.
Second. That was Councilmember Grower, seconded by Councilmember Palermo. All in favor? Thank you.
So the next step on that one would be we'll bring a change order for our consultant for the redesign piece of that at the next council meeting or whenever it's ready.
And then do we need to make a motion on the design build?
Yes, that's, I guess, just guidance. You tell us if you like.
If you guys are comfortable and you think that's the best approach and it gets us the same project faster, I mean.
Yep.
if that's the consensus of council, the contract change order that we will bring to council will reflect that.
Okay.
Because it's ultimately with our engineer, they're going to have to make that assumption, and their fee is going to be based on that direction that we provide to them.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you so much.
Do you need a motion on anything else? Or action on anything else?
No, I think
That would do it. That's it? Okay.
Mr. Palmer, I'd like to at least for consideration, due to I see multiple residents on multiple items we still have left, and I'd prefer a full council, I'd like to motion defer this item to the next transportation committee.
Item number 9.
Yes.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to move this to the next transportation committee meeting. All in favor, say aye, or raise your hands. Motion carries. Item number 10, consideration of a resolution to donate .082 acres of City of Roswell owned land for relocating the National Park entrance to 275 South Atlanta Street as part of the Historic Gateway Transportation Project. Mr. Roth.
Historic Gateway Project, we needed some land from national parks. So we signed a commitment letter with them. We have like a couple different versions of that. So one of the mitigation, so we needed to do some mitigation for the national parks in lieu of the land we need for our Historic Gateway project. So one of the items, this one is actually, I believe, item number 14 on the commitment letter. And the most recent approval of the commitment letter was October 2018. And this has been around for a long time, so we knew we were gonna need this, so we actually bought this little piece, 0.082 acres from Allenbrook property back in 2013. So now National Parks, they have submitted a request that they wanna take the ownership of that land. So what we bought from Allenbrook in 2013 for this purpose, they have now asked. So we need to do the paperwork and basically give the land to the national park. So staff's recommendation is to honor the commitment made in the commitment letter. And here's where it's located. This new driveway access is going to be across from Warm Springs Road. And that's where the trailhead is and some parking for the...
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion approved by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Grower. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item number 11, consideration of retrofitting sidewalk in existing subdivisions. Mr. Ralph.
I want to talk about our sidewalk connectivity program that exists as of today, and then we'll come back to the actual topic. So the sidewalk connectivity program, we started that in 2015. We have identified about 150 sidewalk gaps, and this program only applies to collectors and above. The total cost of all those projects is over $40 million. And we have a very elaborated, very extensive criteria. The criteria is really proximity to schools, parks, and commercial areas, and some other things like requests and goat paths and stuff like that. So we ask for funding every year in the budget. You know, we get a couple, $300,000-$400,000. So slow and steady, but we are moving forward. So it's a good program. We want to keep it, and we want to put in as much money into it because these sidewalks along collectors and arterials, they are a bigger benefit for the city network. So now, when it comes down to the subdivisions, within subdivisions, the local roads that were initially built without sidewalks, it becomes very hard. So this has been discussed in the past many times, you know, at committees, at councils. So I just want to give some facts and a little bit of a history and where we are today, and then some guidance if and how you want to resolve this, these requests that come to us every now and then from different sources. So some facts, you know, the residential streets, the local roads within the subdivisions in the city, they are about 74% of the total mileage in the city. So if you were to do very simple math, you know, if the 25% of the roads which are collectors and above, that's the estimated number to put sidewalk along. Now we're talking about the other 74%. So the number could be a very scary number if we start to tackle that. Within the subdivisions, there is more parcels impacted because on collectors and arterials, the parcels, you know, they tend to be bigger. So dealing with fewer property owners. But when you go into subdivisions, it's smaller frontages. So if you want to do a project that needs right of way, you're dealing with more property owners. So more negotiations, more time. And, you know, it could be actually a little bit higher cost to put sidewalk along within subdivision roads because the area was not designed for sidewalk. The topology in some of the areas that we've got, if a driveway was built steep like this, you can't put a sidewalk across this. If you want to put a ADA compliant sidewalk along a steep driveway, you've got to redo the whole driveway to make the sidewalk ADA compliant. And if you bring down the driveway, you may have to bring down the yard, a part of the front yard. Landscaping, that's a big issue. Trees impact, that's also a big issue. So when it was discussed before multiple times with committee and council and at staff level with different HOAs, some of the issues we learned, it comes down to, you know, if whether the city should take the lead on an effort like this, or should it be the HOA's lead? The city has expertise, but like I said, it could be a very difficult and extensive project, so staff may need more resources if we want to tackle an issue like that for the subdivisions around the city. The HOAs, they don't necessarily have the expertise, but they can always hire outside help, as they do if they want to do any other project within their subdivision. Then who pays? So the city, yes, the city is gradually paying for the sidewalks on collectors and principal arterials, but within the subdivisions where the residents, of course, knowingly bought the property with no sidewalk. And I can actually make the claim that if a resident bought a house in an existing subdivision that has sidewalk, or in a brand new subdivision, they kind of indirectly pay the cost of the sidewalk to the developer. But if you bought a house in a subdivision where there's no sidewalk, then you didn't pay directly or indirectly for the sidewalk because it didn't exist there. So financial arrangements, there's been suggestions and ideas in the past talking about requesting the city, because it's a lot of money that we are talking about. The HOAs, they may not have that money readily available, so there's been ideas discussed in the past for the city to assess in the property tax bill or in some other way. And in the past, the direction from the council, this is now at least a couple years ago, was that city would not assess property owners, because there may be some who's not going to want to have sidewalk and they're going to oppose the idea. So assessing somebody who's not agreeing could be a challenge. And again, like I said, it's not easily understandable, but the right-of-way impact is a big thing. We may or may not need right-of-way, but in general, we know for local roads, the existing right-of-way width is less than the collectors and arterials, so we may have more right-of-way impact. If it's not a right-of-way take, it could be construction easement that we need. And again, if a property owner is not agreeing to the idea of sidewalk, they don't want to pay, then of course they're not going to want to deal with the city to give the land even for temporary construction easement. It's just going to be a very challenging process if the city wanted to move forward. So again, dealing with the non-supportive homeowners, that's going to be a challenge. Again, complete and usable issue, ADA compliance, like going through the steep driveways, we're going to have to rebuild because the city would not want to have non-ADA compliant sidewalks in the public right-of-way. It doesn't matter who pays, who takes the lead. We're not the type of city who would want to have substandard infrastructure in the public right-of-way. And we, of course, cannot skip properties, right? One side street to the next side street, we got to have continuous sidewalk. If two property owners in the middle, they don't want it, we can't just skip them, right? So if a sidewalk is provided, it needs to be continuous for a block. And then just little issues if the HOA is taking the lead and it's not built per the standards, would we put penalties on the HOA? And of course that'll be an extra burden for the HOAs. So if the desire was to actually move forward with the idea of adding sidewalks in the along the public local roads, I think within the subdivision, I think we need like much stronger commitment from the HOAs on the financial impacts and the agreement from the homeowners wherever they want to suggest, and the surety that they all understand the cost. Because right now, none of the subdivision has come to us that, hey, yes, we have done this homework, we know what the impacts are going to be, we know what the cost is going to be, and here's our general buy-in from the residents. We have not seen that. So if somebody, a subdivision, they come in with a stronger commitment with some homework done, like some survey and concept and maybe an informal petition process, and they really have the buy-in and they understand what it's going to cost, because right now we don't know for any of the subdivisions. So that's like the history of the issue, and it comes up every few months. So we just wanted to, it's a staff-generated item. We just wanted to hear what your thoughts are, and if there's any interest. We are here to help, any of the subdivisions who are interested, but then we need to understand the reality of things. And I in general, want to only spend so much time on energy, on things that are like realistically accomplishable.
Floor is open.
This is something that I have talked with some neighborhoods about, and I think there's a desire among the homeowner association and many residents to continuously improve the neighborhoods and to improve walkability, to improve safety, but investing in the community to just to improve quality of life and home values, and recognizing that there is a shortfall in the funds that are available from the city to do that. I think there is some interest among the neighborhoods, to invest in their own neighborhood to improve. And I think this is a good way to do that. I think what I've heard from a lot of neighborhoods is that they would just like to have a tool that they can go out and secure the approval from the neighborhood and the interest, secure approval from a majority of homeowners who would be impacted, and then also some help with the financing arrangement, because the city has some tools to help do that aren't available to the homeowners. And then also just kind of being able to look to the transportation department for their expertise and engineering and help with the project management. I do think there's a lot of interest in continuously keeping our neighborhoods up to date. I know, people looking for a new home or looking for neighborhoods with sidewalks, and I just think that would really do a lot for the city of Roswell to have a tool like that. I know it's worked in other cities, so I think it would be great if we could look at some other cities, and I know there's a lot of research and even a draft ordinance that has been worked on that I think would be good for discussion.
Sure. So a couple of things I want to say. So this other program that I talked about for collectors and above, it took staff well over a year to field investigate all collectors and principal arterials, field investigation, and then the office work to come up with the matrix you guys have seen many times, the criteria and all that. And just remember, this was for 25% of the streets. Now we are talking the other 74% of the streets. So staff work, we're talking a few years worth of work. And when we talk about coming up with the criteria and priority ranking, if I were to do it right, that's how I would do it, like a resurfacing program, like this other program, so look at all the needs in the city and then come up with the criteria and then prioritize. So that's a few years worth of work for staff to come up with all of that.
Well, I think having a tool that would allow the neighborhoods to actually trigger that activity and then kind of work that in somehow to, financing addressed specifically to that project would help just turn it to the neighborhoods and give them a choice to be involved and make the investment and help identify the priorities for staff rather than looking at all 74%.
Okay.
I'll make no bones about this. I don't think that this is the business the city needs to get into. We're talking about a budget shortfall. I don't think that we need to be in the business of loaning HOAs money for a period of 10 years, or I believe the ordinance right now is saying 10 years for repayment. Where is this money going to come from? And HOAs have the ability to assess their residents. So, I don't have any problem being helpful from a city standpoint, but to dedicate financing and staff resources to this, I think that if an HOA wants to build sidewalks, they can assess their community for those sidewalks, and we can help them to show them what needs to be done or whatever the case may be on a very superficial level. But I'm not willing to dedicate staff resources and financing to an HOA that can assess their own members. I just don't think it's a business we need to be in. We've got enough challenges.
So I've been approached over the last year and a half by people in our probably three largest neighborhoods, all with this same issue in question. Your staff is requesting guidance on how to move forward, so there's no proposal, actual proposal on the table. I think other cities have faced the same issue. I know the city of Athens has faced it. These are all, really difficult issues, I understand, to work our way through. What I would suggest for us is to take a look at other places that have solved this riddle, and whether it's the version that Mayor Henry has talked about, or a version where, excuse me, there's some sort of self-assessment that processes through the city and our experts, so that we get the kind of result that we demand in quality and direction. I don't know the answer to the question, but I know that there are a lot of residents who are interested in us coming up with some sort of way to get to the answer. I also would say that when I bought my house, and I think you alluded to it, it required a sidewalk in front of it. So indirectly, but directly, I paid for it.
Yeah.
And I paid for it, in the cost of my home.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage whatever methodology we come up with, it shouldn't be general city funds. It should be very specific to that area or that neighborhood. And the neighbors should, I think that's correct what you're saying. The neighbors should make that decision. If there's a way for us to use our tool set to help, I think as Councilmember Wilsey, that would be positive too. But we need to. I guess my guidance is we need to come up with some sort of way, some sort of tool to address the issue. And I don't, if it's a difficult tool, right, because it requires lots of agreement, it requires people to completely understand that, it's very costly because we're going to outsource the entire project because we don't have city staff to do it. That's part of the cost. If it requires, driveways to be changed and yards to be changed and all those sorts of things, that's part of the cost. And if that cost gets to a point where it's prohibitive, then those neighbors should I think, be able to make that kind of decision. But I see this as different than the public side, I forgot what the term you used is, feeders and arterials.
Collectors and above.
Collectors and above. I think this is a totally different project and different funding, and would like in the future to talk about potentially how we fund the 25% piece, so that it isn't 40 years from now when we get to it. But I think that's a different thing. So I'd like to see us come up with, and maybe it's looking at other cities who have come up with ways to solve the riddle. Councilman Palermo?
Yeah, so I definitely, obviously the devil's in the details, so I really need to, see what different possible solutions are. But I would think this should be a lot less work from staff than creating the policy we had, because the policy was staff needing to come up with a fair way to prioritize every single feeder, collector, et cetera. Whereas in this is just saying that if there's a neighborhood that wants neighborhoods and there's a way to really prove there is that true want, what are different solutions on if and how the city can help. And I would hope that's less effort than coming up with a true priority policy and looking at every single street that we have.
This is a very complex issue that a lot of cities deal with, and in the cities that I've worked with that dealt with this, it was not successful. you know, in my mind, this will no doubt come up through our strategic planning listening sessions with the neighborhoods. My recommendation is we wait, see if this is identified as a priority through that strategic plan. And then if it is, then we can pursue a program, because regardless of what we do, even if we enact an ordinance that will enable this for the homeowners associations to do this unilaterally, we still have to regulate it. We still have to inspect it. We still have to oversee that program. And then if we're going to fund it, that brings in a whole nother bunch of issues with that. So I recommend we wait, see if it's identified as a priority, and if it is, then we can set up a program and move on it.
So I want to say a couple more things. Like I said, this is not the first time, so we have done a lot of that already. So I think I should say what I know already. So one subdivision in our city, they gave us a sample ordinance from one of our neighboring cities, which is city of Dunwoody. They said, there's an ordinance, and the city has an ordinance. Roswell should have that too. So as we talked at staff level in that example city, we learned that, yeah, there's an ordinance, but nobody has used it. Nobody's able to use it because it's almost impossible to do so. So if it's a matter of coming up with an ordinance, coming up with a policy, we can easily work with legal and do that. But maybe there's more successful examples, and we're going to go back and look for those.
Well, I think we need to talk about what we're going to do, because I don't want you guys going down a path that's.
I have an opinion which I can say. So I want to say two more things before I do that. So a few years ago we shared a bad example of not the ordinance but how the issue was tried to resolve. So it's a picture of a street from somewhere in Washington D.C. So rather than impacting people's front yards, what the city did was they took part of the pavement and dumped a concrete sidewalk on top of that. So yeah, maybe people were able to walk. So they did not impact driveways. They did not impact the front yards. People had to walk up and down, because anywhere where was a driveway, you go walk on the pavement and then you get up on the sidewalk. But the terrible drainage issues that created was just beyond. So that was a bad example of somebody was desperate to fix. But again, we look for more options. And I want to say just one more thing. So currently we have a subdivision which is Willow Springs. So they are actually in process of doing a project, and they have almost completed. So they are putting in sidewalk as part of their entrance improvement project off of Old Alabama. They are doing sidewalk in the public right of way. So the way they did it, they could just continue the same model further into their subdivision. So what they did was they hired a consultant, they paid for the design, we reviewed it, made comments, went back and forth, and then they came and asked for a permit, a right-of-way encroachment permit. We issued them a permit. They hired a contractor that constructed that sidewalk. Again, we went back and forth, inspected, made sure it's per the city standards, because eventually, well, it is in the public right-of-way, the city is responsible. So we made sure it's built per ADA. So now I believe it's finished. The project is finished. That's a great model. If any subdivision is really interested, that's the model to follow. But please remember, with the stretch that they did now, it was from the entrance to Club Drive. So they did not impact any single homeowner. When they move further into the subdivision, that's where the fun is going to begin. When they're going to start impacting property, when they're going to actually need some property, that's where it gets complicated. So in general, if I were to suggest something, for a tool, I'd say that if the HOAs, they are interested, they need to take the first real step rather than just asking. So they need to, hire some professional help, do a survey, do a concept, understand the impacts and cost, and go through maybe an informal petition process, and then come to the city. Then we'll know that, we have actually a way forward.
Well, let's agree on the timing and the issue first. I mean, to me, the issue is is this a priority? And I think we need to make sure we identify it as a priority before we start dedicating city resource to it. And then if it is, then we can talk about setting up a program to do that.
Okay, Mr. Palmer, for the people listening in and the people in the audience, you had said that making it part of the strategic planning process, seeing if it, if it comes up as a priority, would be your recommendation. Can you just remind everybody the timing of that and maybe just a moment
strategic plan itself?
and just a moment on the process and how people can participate? So if those large neighborhoods, will they be involved in the discussion, that sort of thing? I think that would be helpful for everybody.
We don't have the engagement plan finalized yet, but as you look at the scope of work, we're going to be doing a lot of engagement activities all around the city. So these questions are going to be put out there. We're going to have engagement portals set up. We're going to be doing a lot of innovative stuff. So everybody's going to have a chance to be heard multiple times through multiple methods. So, and we'll ask direct questions. What's important to your neighborhood? Sidewalks. Okay, let's talk about that. Is that important citywide? And then we'll have to make a determination of all those priorities, what ones we're going to tackle. But back to your point, over the course of the next, probably starting mid-April, end of April, all the way through till the strategic plan is done, we're going to have multiple listening sessions out in the community that we're going to be getting that input. I don't have any dates yet, but that is coming soon.
Rough timing is starting in April and moving through certain.
I would say from May until September, we will have these listening sessions going on, and we'll be getting all this information.
Okay.
And we'll be doing an aggressive marketing campaign, so that is forthcoming. I just don't have the dates yet.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I guess I can see some merits to the approach that you mentioned. And I think my goal is just to have my objective to have a clear policy and an avenue that the neighborhoods can use to reinvest. And I'm comfortable with having that as a part of the strategic planning process, because I do think, walkability and connectivity are going to bubble up to the top.
Absolutely.
So we'll be ready to work as part of the strategic plan, do all the research that you guys mentioned and make it a part of the strategic plan based on what we hear from the public.
Is council okay with that? Just
Yeah.
see this identified as a priority?
I think that makes sense.
I think the research on where this has been successful and how I agree with some of the things the mayor was saying about, upfront funding of a couple $1 million when talking about budget shortfalls is a bit of a challenge, right? And there, for me, thinking about people who bought homes in neighborhoods that didn't have sidewalks and then, imposing an assessment when they may not want the sidewalk at all, kind of struggle with that. But at the same time, it sounds like this has been done successfully in other places. So, as you guys are working through that and the strategic plan comes together, I think we've got a little bit of time to maybe come up with something that works. I think in meeting with Willow Springs a couple times about this, I think the idea that the HOA can do it and we just give them an encroachment permit into the right of way it's really, I don't think the HOAs have the power or the and what they need to actually enact something like that. And that's why I think they're reaching out to the city, and it's at least incumbent upon us to explore this as their representatives and try to figure out and give them an answer as to why this can or can't work. Hopefully we'll come up with a plan.
Okay.
I mean, I think in my neighborhood, it's a little easier of an engineering task, but it's just having that, the initiative and the financing and elevating it as a priority that's we need it by.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Got what you need on that?
I think, yes.
Okay. Item number 12, go ahead.
Sorry.
Let me read this. Item number 12, consideration of a change order request of the National Park Service to the AECOM design and permitting of mitigation elements for the proposed bridge that crosses Vickery Creek in the amount of $346,470. Mr. Ralph.
So again, just gonna say the history again. So Historic Gateway project, a very important project. We needed some land from the national park, so we agreed to do certain mitigation for the national parks in form of the commitment letters. So this went to committee in February 2019. The motion was approved to take it to the city council meeting, but now we are back at the committee because we had some more conversations with the national parks for good in general. So again, some history here. This is the type of bridge we initially, just in conversations, agreed with national parks. And we based our, the initial estimates based on this bridge here shown in the picture on the left. This was kind of a prefabricated bridge, so not a lot of design effort was needed. Construction cost was estimated at about $500,000. So a few months ago, National Parks came to us and they said, well, we would like this, something like this, like a suspension bridge that would look better, fit better, and all that. So that is something that would need extensive design work, and construction cost would be a little bit higher. So that was the request at the last committee, and you guys approved to move it to the council meeting. But then later on, we had some more conversations, national parks, and I guess actually even before that committee, we had a meeting with the mayor was involved, Councilmember Grower, and with national parks, where we basically gave them the message. I think Mayor and Sean Grower, you guys did a good job in conveying the message that yes, we signed a commitment letter, but that does not mean, you can ask for whatever you like. We want to be very sensible towards the total cost of our project and the mitigation we're doing for the national parks. So anyways, maybe that had something to do with it. But anyways, after last committee, we had more conversation with the national parks, and now they are thinking more in line with something like this. These are also suspension bridges, but not as fancy looking as this other one. So this is definitely going to be less cost than what we thought a month ago was going to cost for construction. For design work, yes, it is still an extensive effort for the design. So this is still more than the very initial idea, but definitely less than this fancy looking suspension bridge. So what we are here for today is a change order for our design consultant to do the design work. And as part of the design work, they're gonna, by just looking at the pictures, they could tell that it's definitely gonna cost less than this bridge. So it's gonna be a task for them if they approve this change order to look at, further reduce the cost. And again, we'll still work with the national parks, and we'll hopefully come back with a product that they like, and cost-wise, it's not a huge burden for the city.
So I appreciate you taking this back. Definitely seems to me a more reasonable price than that $1 million that was originally requested with that first one. I just want to make sure with these, they all look really cool, but I want to make sure that you'll be taking safety into account if there's children, et cetera, kind of walking through. Because that one on the left looks really cool, but looks really, really dangerous.
So in I guess the standards, they don't apply in the national parks. I don't know. The width they are wanting to have is like 3 to 4 feet. That's all. That's what they want. And it's inside the national park, and that's what they want. Rob, you want to add anything?
We will design a safe bridge.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Well said, Rob.
Yes, I agree
Come on,
with
stop now and take the order.
Yeah.
Before we even talk about the aesthetics of the bridge, I'd like to talk about the funding. Because we originally had $1 million in our budget for national park mitigation. Now we're up to about $2 million.
Yes.
And that $2 million is coming from a bridge. I have an issue because we had basically, number one, let me say at the committee meeting in February, there were 3 members of council that were not in attendance that day. Then I would also like to add that we were talking about $500,000 from A to Z on the bridge.
Yes.
So, and we could still do that if we used a bridge that is very similar to what we use in our parks, correct?
Yeah.
But now we're going to go up to close to $1 million on this bridge just because the National Park Service wants a cool bridge. And also originally, the National Park Service was discussing a private fundraising for construction of the bridge once the concept is complete. apparently that's no longer on the table. The city is just going to fund whatever the National Park Service wants. We have doubled the cost of this, and I think that we need to lay all of that on the table, and I think that we need to really consider why we're doing this when I think our bridges and our parks are beautiful. They're functional, they look nice, they fit in with the environment. So, and I am more than happy to work with the National Park Service within our budget, but I am not willing to go over that budget. I will oppose it.
So, one of the most compelling things I've heard about this new, now I'm not sure it's worth $1 million. I don't want to start this the wrong way, but that bridge will be carried in as opposed to driven in, correct? And that there are significant needs associated with bringing in a fully prefab bridge, right? In terms of impact to the forest and all that stuff.
Yes, to your first statement, in that if we were to construct a bridge similar to what we currently have parallel to the river that Brecken Parks built 15 years ago, this is hauled in by a crane and placed in place, versus something like this and something like these are very much kind of hand constructed and hauled in pieces and retrofit to the site. Believe it or not, some of the geotechnical equipment required to fasten this to the rock and put this in place carries with it the same challenges for constructability, and actually physically moving a construction operation to this remote location, there is very little difference in the constructability purely looking at these two pictures. And it's not as much the bridge itself, it's the tools used to attach the bridge to these site conditions.
So Rob, can you also talk about the point that the mayor brought up about some fundraising by the national parks for the bridge?
What we've heard from National Park Superintendent Bill Cox, his opinion is that this steel structure is similar to what we have, similar to what we already have along the boardwalk between Riverside Park and State Route 9. A bridge similar to this does not meet the aesthetics that National Park wants inside their unit. They have examples of structures like this. They have examples of structures like these. It's his opinion that a steel prefab structure like this does not meet those standards. We have had conversations with Bill, with Recreation Commission, with Friends of the Parks groups several years ago, where we were talking about potentially private fundraising for a portion of this structure. I do not know the status of that. All I can say is that Bill Cox has not continued to bring that forward as an option from his perspective. I don't know whether he's still willing to have those conversations. I don't know whether that's something that we can initiate and start bringing back up again, but that's not something that he's been bringing to the table.
Well, when we had our conversation in the meeting, I said I'm not willing to go over the $500,000 budget, period. And he seemed very receptive to that. He said, no, I get it. But now he's still coming back with projects that are going to almost double the cost. And my message to him would be, if you can do something that you think is more appropriate for your park and keep it within $500,000, I'm fine with that. They can pick whatever bridge they want as long as our funds don't exceed $500,000. This has just gotten out of hand, and I'm just not willing to fund their aesthetic requirements.
That's the will of the council. We'll set up future meetings with him and try and work this through. I will tell you that if the $500,000 cost to the city out the door for everything is where we want to draw the line, we can deliver this bridge, but we cannot deliver anything on this page or this at all.
So I think, I struggle with this too, in that, you know, we reached an agreement with the national park several years ago on this, right? And, you know, I think that we had a meeting with them, we told, you know, we've come back with this, we're still spending an additional $1 million on a bridge. I do think there are benefits to the community to have an iconic bridge like this, you know, something that's more interesting than a fabricated bridge. And so I think it'd be up to the city to figure out what that's worth. My opinion, it's not worth $1 million. So I think my suggestion is we set up another meeting with the national park now that we have this same kind of scenario, and say, look, this is where we are. If you guys can partner with us, if you can come back to us with alternative options, that's great. Otherwise, I don't know.
Can I finish? Can I
Yeah.
do one
Yeah,
more
sure.
slide, and then
Absolutely.
we can have this conversation? So here is the comparison. So back in 2012, you know, the total estimate for all mitigations, including this bridge and everything else we were going to do out of the commitment ladder, was $1 million, 2012 numbers. And now, the 2019, as of today, with this upgraded bridge, the total is $2 million. So $1 million is a lot of money out of our T plus. We are very sensitive to that. But look at what's happening here underneath. So the city's total expense on the historic gateway project, including the design money that we have already spent and we are still in the process, the final design that we'll have to do, and the $2 million number, the total cost to the city is $6 to $7 million. But then the right-of-way acquisition that GDOT has started, the cost for that is 12, and the construction cost as of today is estimated at $32 million. So if you look at the overall picture, I think it's still a pretty good deal for the city. But I'm not saying that $1 million is, you know, we should forget about the $1 million because GDOT's cost is there. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the longer it takes, the cost only goes up. It doesn't come down.
Well, it's gone up exponentially in a short period of time. So, and we're talking about budget shortfalls. $1 million is $1 million, and it can be very well spent in other parts of the city, as opposed to
I agree.
a fancy designed bridge. But
So I've
no, go ahead.
I've heard some rumbling that the moving the bridge slightly one direction or one upstream or downstream just a little bit may have some significant cost savings. And so if you are going to have another meeting with the Park Service, if that change gets us closer to the numbers, I think that would be important to know. You know, I think that's like, you know, one of the foundation questions to be asked. I don't know if that's still out there.
We'll include that in our conversation. We'll schedule a meeting with National Parks and include that, all these points in that conversation.
Yeah, I guess what I'd heard is it's not necessarily, it doesn't impact really the direction or anything, but we've picked like one of the more difficult, exact, specific places. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it would be, I think, if that's what's driving cost, understanding the cost drivers, I think, is really important.
Okay.
You know, is it inflation, or is it just location, or is it design? I think there's various pieces to that, and as you guys go through, do some value engineering.
It's all of the above, but the most of the additional cost is coming from because they want a different bridge.
I'll add that we're more than willing to look at value engineering location of the bridge. There is and I don't have a good map on our slides, there is a specific area that we need to be within, plus or minus 100, 200 feet near the sewer pipe. And I would not expect significant cost savings within that envelope.
So do you need a motion to go back and focus really on the price, or do you have everything you need?
I think we're good. It's just, so Mayor, do you want to be in that meeting?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. So Councilmember Brewer will be
Great, thank you.
doing that as well. Rob, can you set that up?
Yes.
I think we're good on this.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item number 13, discussion regarding a traffic control device at Roswell High School and King Road. Ralph.
Thank you. So this was a request from Councilmember Grower to add. he suggested a traffic control device, but I wanted to bring in all the history and all the information we have. And a traffic control device is part of the discussion, but there is a lot more to it, and we just didn't have the time to prepare the item, but I have the slides on that. So just to orient you, this is King Road, Highway 92, and then Hardscrabble Road at the top, Roswell High School. Their bus entrance is off of Hardscrabble Road. This main entrance with the circle here, that's the parent drop-off area. And then the student parking is this big parking lot, and that's where their entrance is. So all the three pieces, they do not connect with each other. So buses can only use this, parent can only drop off here, students can only go in and out of here and park. Just to give you an idea on the daily traffic on these roads, Highway 92 is 52,000, 54,000, King Road is 14,000, north of Hardscrabble, King Road is 10,000, Hardscrabble is 15 and 17,000, Chafin is 4,000. So just to give you this, Coleman Drive is 465 cars a day. Some facts about the school: it's 2,400 students and faculty, so it's a lot of trips made to the school every day. There's an existing RFB at the crossing which was put in a couple years ago, and it's extremely congested, the whole area. In the rush hour it's congested, and when you add school traffic on top of that, it's just terrible. And we have known this for a long time, and we have looked at it in the past as well. And the congestion, of course, it is causing a lot of crashes. So if we looked at the ranking of the segment and the intersection, it's going to list, closer to the top. So we just used our drone to take some pictures. So on the left, this is the student entrance, and this is the visitors or the parent drop-off entrance. And then this is the intersection of Hardscrabble and King at the top. And this is during the dismissal time of the school. So see how traffic is just backed up all the way here and then further, and then you add the student parking lot traffic, and it just continues into 92. So it is a mess. There's no question about that. Now this is a shot from the drone. It's standing on top of 92 and King. This is just showing you how the traffic works. It's a pretty crazy situation. This is one northbound lane that goes all the way to the intersection of Hardscrabble and the King Road, and then there's this drop lane. So it's here, right turning traffic could go in here and all the way, and then it stops here. So people have to merge if they're going north. But what a lot of people do, I guess this guy, he just didn't want to merge here. So he's just trying to merge like right there, and there's this left turning car from 92, and he's trying to get in, and then everybody else is just stuck behind. If this motorist, if they could just go all the way and use this capacity, nobody's using it, but it's there. So it would be better, but people don't use it. We have a drone video as well. Everybody just gets confused or gets stuck here. We also have people who actually, from the south of the intersection, when they are in the outside lane, because there's 2 through lanes at that intersection, they would just come up and go through this gore to get into Walgreens and this shopping area. So they just ignore this gore here. So the issues, again, it's a lot of congestion there, back up into adjacent intersections, so up and down. And then, like I said, single access point for the carpool and the student parking lot. Very high traffic volumes in the area, definitely not enough capacity. And the Hardscrabble Green Loop construction that's going on, of course, that's not helping because there is traffic shifts and all that. Maybe people are trying to avoid that. And then the traffic signal detection at the intersection of Hardscrabble and King, because of the construction, it's all cut, not working. So that's just adding to the problem of that northbound back up there, which hopefully in the next couple of months, at least those 2 problems are going to go away. So there's a lot of history. We have worked with Fulton County Schools before, and we actually have a current effort after the recent complaints from a few months ago on the night of the curriculum night that coincided with the PM peak. So it's already a big mess, and when you coincide the with the curriculum, night traffic, school traffic on top of that, it got worse. So we've had a couple of meetings with the Fulton County schools, and there is more coming up, and Scott Bruner is the lead on those. And so we also are in process of hiring our next pool of on-call consultants, and as part of their qualification review, we give them a problem statement to solve for us, give their opinion. So we made this their problem statement, their sample project. We're going to give all this information I'm going to share with you today, and they're going to build on top of it. So it's going to be the experts from the region looking at the same issue, maybe to come up with better ideas. So in talking to the school and reviewing the issue internally, we have two short-term solutions. One is for the city to do, and the other one is for the school to do. So first, short-term solution by the city. Again, remember this issue here. This guy is now going through on top of a gore, and then this guy turning right, they're just waiting. They can't go because this person is going. So we came up with this idea. So we're going to put some delineators in this gore here and bring them up all the way, at least maybe 100 feet, 50 feet, something like that. So people turning right from 92, they'll be forced to stay in this lane, and hopefully they'll use more of this capacity that exists here. So that'll help with some of the cars moving in. But then again, when it's backed up from the intersection above and the school entrance, that's going to help a little. It'll just give them some more storage area. So that's all we could do, and we are planning to do it in the next couple of weeks. So that'll help a little. Then for the short-term solution, what the school could do, they haven't agreed, but we'll suggest it to them one more time. This is the student parking lot, and compare the queuing capacity they have here for the parent drop-off versus what they have now at the other entrance. It's just a lot more storage capacity here. So if they were open to using this area around the parking lot for the parent drop-off, a big improvement could be made on the entrance, because all that traffic that backs up out of the parent entrance, it'll just stay on the school property in the parking lot. So generally they don't want to mix the student parking with the parent drop-off, but here it's a big mess, and if they were open to do this, it would be very helpful, and we are going to suggest it to them one more time.
So before you switch off that slide, the other thing that I've heard from, I can't count how many parents, is at the bottom of the screen that a car taking the left turn out of the school.
Yeah.
This is a safety concern there as well. It's a pretty difficult left turn to make, and so I know we've talked about this yesterday, and you guys are going to come to us with some recommendations. I would ask that you all think about that left turn, and and we talked about maybe not allowing it at all, or are there ways to fix it? But given these are young drivers and it's a pretty dangerous intersection, I would ask that you look at some ideas there to keep them safe.
So we'll include that in our conversation with the school. That's a good idea.
Well, let me ask a question. Has anybody talked about circulation changes within the property? So, for example, the parent drop-off area?
Yeah.
Yes.
That you don't exit out onto King, you exit to the north?
That's a great idea. It's listed here. We have had those conversations, but like I said, in general, school does not want to mix different type of, like school buses and parents. They don't want to mix the two. And it's a terrible design whenever it was done. So again, this is the bus area. It does not connect to the parent drop-off area, which does not connect to the student parking
And
lot.
it's just a curb that separates all of this, so it's not like it's an expensive.
So that is an idea listed here under long-term solutions. What I'm saying, we need to have a combination of different ideas, different improvements. So I've listed them all here. So we need more capacity along King Road. So that drop lane here, city could do a project to extend that drop lane into the student parking lot, or maybe into the parent drop-off We'll need the property from the school, but I'm sure they'll be open to work with us. That'll make huge improvements, but because a lot of the student traffic could just use that and get in. They wouldn't have to go into the through northbound lane. So that's a very good idea, good suggestion. It could improve a lot. It's just going to cost some money.
But could you get past the daycare? Because that daycare is almost sitting on the street.
Yeah, it may be tight, but I think we have.
Yeah, we may have to shift the roadway a little bit to the left. There's more right of way on the west side, so it's possible.
And then capacity at the intersection of King and Hardscrabble. So we definitely need, more. It doesn't have a right turn lane, so we need more capacity here. So it could be an intersection improvement in the future. The city could do it, and of course, it's going to need some money. And then a traffic signal at the entrance under the current situation, at the main parent drop-off entrance, we could put a traffic signal there, but it's not going to help much because traffic is just backed up. There is not enough capacity, nowhere to go. So a signal is probably not going to help much. But it could be a good solution in the future when we have that extra through lane.
Does the signal help with safety though on a left turn, even if it doesn't improve capacity? That would be the other question I'd ask.
It would help with the safety, but it would make the delay worse. Because remember, if it's a cop directing the traffic, all they gotta do is stop and you go.
Yeah, sure.
But if it's a traffic signal, every time it's switching a phase, green time, it's wasting 7 seconds of all red and yellow.
Right. Yes.
So safety could improve, but operationally it'll get worse.
Yeah.
We set up a task force, probably was about 9 months ago, maybe. My office, Patrick Burke, the COO of Fulton County Schools, their PD, our PD, transportation. We've met at the high school and here for multi-hour meetings where we've talked about all this, not just King Road, but the circulation in general all over that campus. And I know we've drilled down at all these issues. And Scott, I think the last meeting we talked about some people from the different agencies were going to get together and start drilling down into some of these initiatives. But I don't remember if the traffic signal came up, and I remember it wasn't very viable according to that discussion we had.
So it's with the additional capacity, whenever that gets done, then a traffic signal, I believe, could help. So it definitely needs to stay on the list. So one more thing. So this is Hackett Road that comes off of Highway 92. We have talked about this idea before. If there was a way to bring another access point, maybe somewhere here to connect to the student parking lot, that would be very helpful. But of course, we want to be sensitive to the residents here in the area. But it is an option. Same for Coleman Drive that comes off of Chafin. It ends here at a cul-de-sac, and there's some easement there that goes through the cemetery that has opportunity to connect to the school. If not as a road, just as a trail, this could become another optional drop-off area. But again, we want to be very sensitive to what the residents in the area would want. So just ideas, just listing them all down here. And then again, for the school, these two are for the school to consider, like the mayor said, if they could just be open to connect this little connection between the parent drop-off and the bus. Parents could enter here and exit here on Hardscrabble, make right turns only. It'll help. Parents will have to drive a little bit longer, but it'll be safer and it's not going to be as badly choked. So we're going to continue to discuss these ideas with the school, and we'll see where it's going to go. And they still have opportunity to improve internal circulations, right? Like if they did the carpool here versus here, they just have a lot more storage capacity. So we'll continue to work with the school.
And if I could add, I think just to add to what Mohammed said, is that there is a fundamental capacity issue at Hardscrabble and King. And when you look at the drone video, you'll see that it's over capacity 2 or 3 approaches from 7 a.m. to 9:30. I've been watching it on Google Traffic, and also from about 3:15 to 6:30. So as the traffic on King increases over time, that's just going to exacerbate the school situation. So that's really fundamentally one of the key findings from really our drone video.
So it seems like there's a lot of work to be done here, and it's gonna cost a lot of money, right? I think the most important thing is keeping young drivers safe pulling out of the Roswell High. I think a restriction on the left turn there is a potential. I know that's not exactly exciting for people, but at the same time,
Yeah.
is that a short-term fix?
A lot of agencies force right turns during school hours at the schools.
Something like that, but, a master plan of this area, because I think, Mayor, you've talked about it a lot, just getting on the 92 from Woodstock is a nightmare, right?
Well, yeah, it backs all the way up, and when we add another school onto Woodstock Road, it's gonna be even worse, but no, I sit at that intersection trying to go to the gym, and the reason why it doesn't move is because it's backed up on King.
So it feels like this whole corridor needs a master plan. Kind of what are we going to do now and what's coming in the future and how are we going to fund it? Because it's only going to get worse with the new school. And it's a pretty high priority intersection for lots of reasons.
So we have a lot of great ideas, and we're going to get more when the consultants review it.
Okay.
So after that, it just really becomes a financial thing. But this is definitely high on our list.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for all the work you did on it.
Okay.
Thanks, Jensen. Moving on to administration, item 14, consideration of a resolution to accept the 2019 home grant.
Motion to approve. Will Mr. Grover entertain this? Because this is not to decide what they go towards, it's just to accept the grant.
Just to accept the grant, that's correct.
Okay, my motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second by Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor, say aye, or raise your hands. Thank you. Item number 15. Thanks, Charles. Good work.
Twisted our arm.
Consideration of a memorandum of understanding with Atlanta Plays It Forward to provide staffing for the 2019 Alive in Roswell event series. Mr. Fisher.
Do I have a motion? Let me say
I think
a
you
few
can be that
words first
lucky.
before we get started. So I had this item in our last administration finance meeting, and we presented one recommendation, and that recommendation was to use an outside agency to staff the labor for Alive in Roswell. Didn't present any other options at that time, and although you all approved it to move forward at that committee meeting, I think there was a lot of hesitation on doing that. I don't know that you had the confidence in moving that forward, but you felt like that was all there was. Well, there's more to it than that. So Gary, when we talked about our agenda review, suggested that we come back to a committee meeting before it goes back to council. So I sent you out an email Monday that I finished up, and if you don't have that, I'd like to hand that out to you because it really gets into a lot more detail. So what I did, rather than just having the one recommendation, I went back and actually looked at what the issue was, what the rules are regarding how we pay, how we can pay labor, what applications might be available for Alive in Roswell, because that's specifically what we were talking about, and then some of the conclusions. So for a little history, at Alive in, and again, this is Alive in Roswell right now. For a little history, it's always been through the laborers through some type of a contract with whoever has been organizing the event. So, and they have paid a certain amount of money, $45 an hour, I believe, is what they paid paid the people that they used for labor for that event. We no longer have a management company doing that. That has been accepted. You all have accepted Alive in Roswell now as a city event. So that puts some limitations and some rules from FLSA on how you pay employees. So in the past, even though they were City of Roswell employees, for instance, the police department that's over there doing the security and all, they need to be Roswell police officers because they're in our jurisdiction. But they don't have to be employed by the City of Roswell. So we say you need this many police officers. The event organizer would then hire them at $45 an hour. and so forth as we go through the different labor. Now that it's a city event, if we do that on our own, we cannot just pay everybody $45 an hour because they are now a city employee doing a city employee task. They're doing their general jobs. So we have examples of that, and I was speaking with Mr. Leatherman about other examples of that. Our city events that we have right now, 4th of July celebration, end of summer celebration, Memorial Day, anytime we have those kind of events, we pay our employees their normal pay. That's just what we pay them to do a city event. But Alive in Roswell was always different from that and unique. So in trying to stay historically accurate to what we have done in the past for those staff members, the easiest way to do it would be to hire somebody or pay somebody to take care of the labor side of it. And that's when we went back to the person that was doing the original management of the program, which was Atlanta Plays It Forward. We approached them and said, could you provide us the labor? If they provide us the labor, that can be contracted labor because, again, it goes back to they're not our employees anymore. He's providing labor. That company's providing labor to us, and we could do that at $40 an hour. Sponsorship-wise, we couldn't do $45. That's why we did $40 an hour. So that was the option that I brought to you. We can also, as another option, and maybe the cleanest option based on what we're doing with this event in comparison to all the other city events we have, is we take our employees that we have and we pay them their rate. If it goes into overtime, we pay them time and a half. It's up to the department directors how they manage that, whether they manage the staff to allow them to do some flex time, where they know they're going to be working over on that particular night, they could flex them earlier. As long as they don't go over for regular employees, not public safety, they have different hours. But if you go over 40, if you work more than 40 hours in a pay period, you get time and a half for those hours. So you can flex those hours and not have to pay the overtime. So that's one option. Is they're our employees, they're going to be working, we're going to pay them whatever they work. Overtime if they get over 40 hours. The second option is we have an outside agency that hires the labor for us and manages the labor for us, as was that MOU that I showed you. The third option is we could provide in our pay scale a special rate for event workers where we could say, for the hours you worked at event, Mr. Cleanup person that is going to be working the event, if they work 4 hours at that event for that pay period, they go to that rate of $40 an hour for 4 hours for that rate, and it just goes on to their paycheck that way. There's an issue with that. If we have a city event rate in our pay, then every employee that works 4th of July celebration, end of summer celebration, Youth Day parade, and Music on the Hill is going to get that same rate. And that would be a very large budget impact because we cannot differentiate. The only way I can differentiate Alive in Roswell from the other events is if an outside agency is providing the labor to us. That would make it unique. Other than that, it's a city event. We either need to pay them by the hour or we can pay all of our employees that work city events a city event rate. So those are kind of the three options that we have looked at. All of them can be, forever options. They can all work for different reasons. The cleanest approach to make Alive in Roswell as it would be with all the rest of our events is that now that it's a city event, the employees get paid their normal pay if they work the event. So I'll open up for any questions.
So thank you for laying out all those different options. I really like that thoroughness. I'd say I prefer not to have to bring in a separate company to kind of manage this and hire it, so I prefer to not do that. And I lean towards, and everything you've said, as well as I did read the email that you sent on Monday, I kind of prefer what you just defined as the cleanest option, which is treating it like the other events. It looks like the one concern that you had is potentially the fact that just they were used to making a much higher rate for that one night.
Right.
What I'm wondering is, do you feel there would still be a number of employees that would prefer to still, if knowing that they just get the time and a half potentially for that overtime, do you feel there would still be a strong demand of a number of employees wanting to go work the event on Thursdays, or do you feel that we have a challenge where staff would prefer not to work these extra events?
I think the challenge would come from the public safety side. And I don't, can't speak for a lot of other people, but I know from Rec and Park standpoint, they work events at a normal rate anyway. I mean, they're used to working those events. That's why I first came with the idea of trying to use an outside agency just to keep it like it has been. The reason I say public safety would be probably the ones most impacted is because they're used to working side jobs. And in their side jobs, I think they're generally making $40, $50 an hour. So they've kind of looked at this event as 7 days worth of side jobs. So they would probably be the ones that would feel the most, put out by it. But at the same point, it's a city event now, and we're all city employees. So I could see where from that standpoint it would. Transportation, I talked with Steve, and Muhammad was during that transition. Yeah, they'd like to have it, but I think, they're going to work it regardless. We're all going to work it regardless. There's going to be public safety there, and there's going to be transportation and all. I think transportation will be okay with it. I think Rec and Parks will be used to it. Our folks from special events, they know how it is. We can flex some time as much as we can. So I think public safety would be the ones most impacted from a morale standpoint.
Do you know how far off the public safety folks would be?
If they got paid overtime?
Yeah, assume it's just for the moment, assume it's over time and a half.
I do not at that level because it's different people. So there's some different rank that goes in there. So I haven't looked to see specifically what their time and a half.
It might not be that far off.
I don't think it would be from $40 an hour once we get to time and a half.
Yeah, I think you're going to be pretty close. So maybe it wouldn't be so bad. I have to, I heard what Councilmember Palermo said. I'd kind of like to see everything in the same lane too, if possible. And if they're not that far off of the rate that was being paid, boy, it sure would be nice to have it, done the cleanest way, I think is the way you phrased it. I'm just trying to think, somebody making 50,000, I'm just trying to do that math. I'm just not sure they're that far off.
I can look at that and
I think that would be really, really instructive for us.
If it looks like it's going to be a tremendous amount, we can come back. Otherwise, we can just do this internally if you would like to do that way. But I can look and see, and we can talk more about that.
The question about, regarding the other events that employees work, what typically has been the impact on, number one, cost of overtime? And then I guess loss of productivity in like irregular jobs if they're being assigned to do something else, or does this just come as a special job? And then the other issue is how are folks selected to do the overtime or to work the special events?
I don't want to put Mr. Leatherman on the spot, but I don't actually manage those events, and most of those events fall under the management of recreation and parks. I do know that we can adjust schedules as much as possible to not have overtime, but most of these folks that have done these in the past know very well that it's coming up every year.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say that the workload tends to be on the parks and maintenance staff. They are traditionally the hourly rate staff, not our exempt employees that are working these events. And that's the piece, as you look at their pay rates, where the $40 to $45 an hour does make a significant difference because there is a large gap in what they make on a traditional hourly rate versus that special rate. Generally, we can find people to work the events. What happens, especially in our event season, is the sheer volume of events and just physically how long they can continue or want to continue to work versus, if they're putting in 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week on special events, it doesn't change the fact that we've got 40 hours a week of maintenance work that we're already backlogged on or that we're trying to get done. And so that's where the incentive of the additional and the higher rate for some of these contract events like Live in Roswell was valuable because they were doing the work, but they were getting paid at a quite a bit higher rate than what had traditionally been paid for them if they're working regular time or overtime. It's not to say that they don't have the time and the capacity. We generally try not to adjust and flex our maintenance schedules to accommodate these events, because then it just puts us behind. The grass doesn't stop growing, the ball fields still need prepping.
Right.
And so for us, we just have to continue to essentially work that overtime. We have, for our traditional events that are currently budgeted, we have that built into our overtime budget. So we anticipate it coming into each budget cycle.
So what we're talking about here is an additional 7 events for the tasks that are involved with the most of the park staff. It's 5 hours, so 35 hours over the summer would be the difference that they would be working for these events, and there's 5 or 6 of them that work that event. So about 35 hours for the event season for each employee.
So do we also, and I know during the summer you hire temporary employees as well, so that's an opportunity too, I would think, to add staffing where necessary.
It is, we would just have to balance, and it just comes to a willingness to work the volume of hours and working with our maintenance teams to figure out, how many staff do we anticipate actually being able to fill the slots that are available, and if we start to come up short, then we can add additional temporary staff should we need to.
Thank you.
Well, my preference is to have everything the same. A city event's a city event. We can't, and as we want to create more events, we can't blur those lines. But what I would suggest as we are creating more events is having our events folks really dial in on the cost of these events to the city. I think that that's really important because we all want special events and festivals and all of the wonderful things that make Roswell fabulous. But there's a cost involved, and how does it affect staffing? Because we've just taken back over a city event. When we created the Music on the Hill or the Sounds on whatever, did we factor that in, what the cost is to the city and what strain it puts on our employees? So I think we need to have a realistic approach to this, because as we continue to expand festivals and events, I think that we need to consider the cost and the staffing. Do we need to hire people, in the various departments because of the events we're creating? So
we do know specifically for Live in Roswell, they keep pretty detailed on that. So we're right at $40,000 for the total amount of money for the labor for the year. May vary a little bit in the summertime depending on how many police officers are actually there, but it's right at $40,000, $39,000 some odd dollars for the staffing there, and the exact number that we do every year because they've done that for years. So the events that we're doing now, that and Music on the Hill, they know exactly what those are. Your point's well taken, though. Do we eventually want, and maybe it's something along the lines that we do in Rec and Parks now, where we could do seasonal event workers to help handle that. That could be a budgeted item for some time in the future. It's not lifeguards, it's event workers that can handle a lot of that we could put in there and not have to task our normal 8 to 5 people with more. So that's something we could definitely look at. From the impact standpoint, we got a pretty good idea on those now.
And so I think a lot of great points from all 3 officials that I've heard, and I agree with. What I want to raise as well is if we do go down the path we described as the cleanest, which I'm hearing different support for, it's something we could always reassess as well. If you're coming back to us and letting us know that the entire police department, not a single one of them wants to sign up for it, the entire Parks and Rec department, they can't get a single person to do it, then clearly we need to reassess and come up with a detailed policy for what makes the most sense.
Right.
But I think it could make sense to go the cleanest route and just see if as long as we're opening it up to the full departments, seeing if there's that demand.
I think I've got what I need then, if there's nothing else.
So this would be on the next agenda for the council.
Actually, it won't need to be. It really doesn't have to. That's just internal for us.
Okay.
So that was just more of a discussion. The only thing that would have had to have come to you all is an MOU, which is why we had that on there to start with. But actually, I'm glad that we did, because we ended up having this discussion that came out of it. So we're good.
Okay. Item number 16, consideration for the mayor and city administrator to sign a contract with Trident Insurance Services, LLC, in the amount not to exceed $1,011,351. An additional amount of $8,000 is requested for the National Flood Insurance Program. and $7,950 is requested for cyber liability insurance for a total not to exceed $1,027,301. Mr. Fisher.
And I think I'm presenting this one since David's not here, so, and Bob didn't look up, so I'm assuming that
I can do it if you want me to do it.
I presume I'm presenting this one.
Well, I'll take it. This is an increase of 4% from last year. It was $971,856. Trident is about the only one we can get who will cover us. Their experience with us has been adverse to them for the last 5 years. They've collected gross premiums of $3,958,368, and they paid out $4,884,318. A loss ratio of 124%. Generally speaking, they want 60 to 70%. So I think we are lucky to get what we've got, and we recommend renewing with Trident.
And Rapstick was about $2.5 million.
Yeah, Rapstick was a
We took a big hit on Rapstick.
So I move to approve, move forward to council meeting.
Second.
Motion approved by Councilmember Tizer, second by the mayor. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, raise your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Moving on to Recreation and Parks, item 17, approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a solar energy procurement agreement with Mimosa Energy Partners LLC and to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Friends of Mimosa Hall and Gardens. Mr. Leatherman.
Thank you. And as I kick off our presentation, just want to say thank you for taking us off cycle. I know it's been a long morning. And if I can invite Mike Harris and Kelly Callan and Scott Hitt from Friends of Mimosa also to come up, and we're going to tackle the presentation and if you've got any questions as we move through this item. But just as we have a couple of reminders from our November meeting, this is about Mimosa Hall. We've had work since the city acquired this property. We've been going through a series of projects on the building. So far, we've completed the work on this list: various safety repairs, property repairs, ground penetrating radar surveys, facility condition assessment, and others. And I reported back on the majority of that in November, and also gave you this budget. And we're continuing to work through the budget that the City Council had authorized in this year's fiscal cycle. We still have about $40,000 for the roof replacement, and we also have $38,000 set aside for gutters and soffits, and that currently is in our budget this year as we start to talk about the next step in the solar procurement agreement with Friends of Mimosa. In November, we reported on these items that were going. We're continuing our landscape restoration work on the property itself. We are on track for the opening of April 22nd. I know all of you have it on your agendas, and the formal invitation will be coming out later this week or the first part of next week. We've completed the tree survey, as also as the tree removal is finishing up today and tomorrow. And we have this request for the Friends of Mimosa to finalize the business plan and bring it forward for consideration. The second draft is ongoing, and I think that's actually on my queue here pretty soon to review. We have some additional budget recommendations for 2020 that the mayor and city council will review as part of your 2020 recommendations on items for the home itself. That is also moving forward. And then we have the item today of the solar roof, which we're anticipating bringing back to council, should you approve it, here in April, so that we have that done in advance of the opening of the grounds on the 22nd. And so that's why we're off cycle today and trying to hit some of these deadlines. What we're working on today and what you'll see in the agreements before you is an agreement for solar procurement with Mimosa Energy Partners. It is not with Friends of Mimosa Hall. We have a couple of members of Friends of Mimosa that can explain some of the details associated with that. The agreement will also maintain the solar system throughout the life of the agreement, and Mimosa Energy Partners will have that responsibility. It's a 20-year agreement with an optional 5-year renewal. And that 5-year renewal has to be mutually accepted both by the city and Mimosa Energy Partners. And then when authorized, and if authorized by state legislation, this agreement will allow Mimosa Energy Partners to sell energy credits and then reinvest those back into the property. And either Kelly or Scott can touch on kind of the fundamentals of those options, because I am learning as I go with a couple of these procurement agreements. with that, what we're asking is to move the solar energy procurement agreement to the April 8th meeting today, as well as the MOU, which I haven't talked much about, but this formalizes the relationship between Friends of Mimosa and the city. That the city will continue to operate the facility, operate the property, operate the building once it's open to the public, and Friends will continue to support us through fundraising, as well as some other research projects associated with the Mimosa property directly. And with that, I'll turn it over. That's the end of my slides, and I know I went through them pretty quickly, but I'll turn it over to Mike Harris with Friends of Mimosa, just for any quick comments and other introductions, should you want to, Mike.
Well, first, we'd like to thank you, the city, for purchasing the property. Thanks for the support you've given us throughout. We've had a very, very close relationship with Councilman Tizer, who's been very engaged with us, and Mr. Leatherman and his staff, very engaged with us, move things forward. We think that as we've been gaining friends, that we've learned that the city and the residents are very excited about our vision for the house. The idea of this solar roof is pragmatic in a lot of ways, practical in a lot of ways, and we think it's exciting for our residents. The solar roof will make us the oldest net zero house in the United States. Maybe the world. We don't know that yet, but we think in the world, but certainly in the United States, which creates a draw. Our whole vision is to create Mimosa Hall and Gardens to be a draw for the residents, for travelers, for visitors. We see the same sort of traffic that goes to a Barnsley Gardens kind of space to come to Mimosa. And that creates a whole ecosystem for the other houses as well. And that's our vision. I can't speak to the solar agreement because these guys have been working very, very hard on it. So I'll have them do that. But we wanted to just first thank you, the city, for saving this house, this treasure, this gem for the community. And we're committed to doing everything that we can to make it everything that we promised. A real attraction. Yeah, a real draw for the community.
Go ahead, John.
Sure, so I can speak to the agreement, or if there are questions, maybe that's.
There was a slide back there a second, if you could just go back, when authorized by state legislation.
Sure.
Yeah.
So maybe it's best to step back a second and talk about the structure and why it's Mimosa Energy Partners, and that changes a bit. So initially, the concept was that we could raise money by attracting investment tax credit dollars by garnering partners directly that could take solar energy tax credits directly by investing money in this project. So that partners is actually, that term is coming out since we first proposed the letter of intent. So the agreement and the way that the LLC that we've set up is structured, it is 100% owned by the nonprofit Friends of Mimosa Hall and Gardens. So the 501c3 owns 100% of the LLC, and the reason to set up an LLC, which just owns the solar energy infrastructure, is that it is a separate and distinct subset and subpart of the general mission of the nonprofit. But it is, for tax purposes, a disregarded entity. It just kind of flows through. It will have no partners, so we're dropping that. We've dropped that from the name of the LLC. It's just Mimosa Energy LLC at this point. The LOI has enough language to say where it's designated, and that tracks through that we don't think that needs to be changed. The energy procurement agreement is something that was set up in 2015 by state legislation. That is a change from what was prior to that. If you wanted to have energy provided to any particular place, it had to either go through Georgia Power or an EMC, a regulated monopoly. But that legislation in 2015 by the state legislature said we're now going to open that up for solar energy to be creatively financed by third parties. So that's the mechanism that allows for this LLC structure to provide solar energy for this particular piece of property. It's a third-party financing kind of. The reason that it's an LLC structure and not just done directly by the city or by the nonprofit is to anticipate that future when set up by the state. Sale of renewable energy credits. So there are 36 states that have a tradable market for credits that are traded on a marketplace. A dollar amount is set and purchased by usually international companies that have a need to offset their carbon footprint or something like that. Georgia's not one of them, but that legislation in 2015 sets us up to sometime in the future become maybe the 37th. Thank you. So that's the idea. For now, the offset and the benefit directly is in savings and energy costs.
So I think this is all exciting. So I read through the packet information. So I'm definitely proud that the city was able to preserve the home and really so appreciative for all your hard work both prior to the preservation as well as the ongoing. So thank you. I think really, unless Mr. Leatherman, Mr. Palmer, Mr. Halsey gives us any kind of concerns with their review of the documents, it looks good to me. And really my one question would be, hopefully you're going to work with our communications department to really be announcing that we're the, it's the oldest net zero. I want to make sure you're getting full support to make sure that every single person out there is aware of what Roswell's doing.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's perfect. Love to see it. One question I have is just what kind of operations and administration is basically required to carry out the work of this energy?
So initially, installation, and then ongoing, if and when these renewable energy credits become available, keeping track of that. So it's bookkeeping.
Thank you for the questions. I just wanted to add one thing, and certainly for residents that are sitting in the audience, I feel like everybody at this table has kind of followed along and knows. But a couple of things, and Jeff, I should have probably sent that along because Scott has mentioned. So first of all, we want to say it right off the bat helps saves the citizenry about $5,000 a year in the house just being able to maintain itself. So that's what it means in terms of net zero. It'll support itself. And then the solar renewable energy credits that we're referring to here, which is what we're talking about this LLC supporting, when those credits are able to be retained and sold, what it means to Mimosa and all of us is that about today, sitting here in very conservative language, is about $20,000 a year, which could be then sold and gone right back to the house and the property. So it's a very big deal when you look at it sitting here today, just in terms of what we're going to be able to do, not just in publicity. I appreciate you raising that up, Mike, because that gets really lost. Even in our friends group, I always say, you buried the headline, right? But in practical terms, $5,000 a year, and the potential, in addition to that, of getting 20,000 plus back in funds so that we can reinvest it in other things in the property and perhaps other houses.
And who makes up the LLC for the?
So currently, actually, it's a name you probably know, and I'm sorry he wasn't able to be here today. He will be at the meeting when you guys voted in on the 8th. But Ashok Nagrani, who is a longtime Roswell resident and business owner, has agreed to serve in that volunteer role as manager. And the way the language reads, and I believe they have a copy, right?
Yes, in their packet.
Okay, so Friends of Mimosa Hall and Gardens works alongside Ashok for all of the major decisions. But Ashok is, I could share your bio, but I think a lot of you know him. And so he's interested and excited about taking on this new role. And so we feel confident that he'll do a good job of nurturing whoever the next person will be to take that over.
And then who determines how the money's spent? So let's say we get 20,000, which is a great problem to have. Who makes the decision on how that money is used?
So there are some language in the operating agreement that you have a copy of that mandates that all of the money, if there is revenue, so again, this is an if situation, those renewable energy credits are not yet available, but if
Right.
there is profit generated, the operating agreement mandates that those dollars could be dedicated back to the purpose of the 501c3, and the 501c3's purpose is to support Mimosa Hall. So that is locked in by the operating agreement. So there's no decision that will be made in the future. That's mandated by the operating agreement.
Now, I thought
Sorry, if I could just add to that real quick too. That's also where the MOU comes in, and why we're bringing all of them together at once is then the MOU sets up the relationship between Friends and the city, in that support recognition that Friends will then assist with the city's investment back into the facility. And I think in working with the historic asset manager, once we bring that person on board, then we'll start to define that priority list. You know, if you were to ask me right now, and as you'll see in our budget coming up, we've got, you know, essentially about $500,000 worth of investment opportunity in the house and structure itself, that is just our health and safety and high priority items. And so we would be just working down that list in the near term, should that money become available, and start working on health and safety items that allow access into the facility and then support the programming of that facility for additional revenue generation.
Great.
So when I read the packet, and I had actually just closed in earlier, the way it seemed, without a doubt, it was all that money would absolutely be going back to the Mimosa Hall and Gardens and that restoration, and of course advice and guidance and help and partnership with the organization. But I thought the budget expenditures and those aspects were coming to City Hall. Was that not the case?
No, it would reside with Friends, so it would get deposited into Friends as the nonprofit partnership, and then the decision point of investment would then be through the MOU and the relationship of how we invest essentially Friends money onto the property. So we would authorize that investment and identify the high priorities on the city side.
That's what I'm referring to.
But yeah, Friends would be writing the check.
Right. No, exactly. That's how I read the MOU. Okay.
Any further questions or comments? What's your pleasure?
Need a motion to move forward?
Second.
Motion approved by Councilmember Wilsey, second by Councilmember Palermo. Any further discussions, questions? All in favor, raise your hands. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.